Harold, a young man, gets praised for his hard work, and you can see the gratitude light up his face as he smiles. Someone even wonders what flipped his mood so fast, but just when they're ready to say more, Harold bolts and runs away. Harold beams like the sun, dashing off in a rush, grinning so hard you can tell his mind is racing with pure joy, because his brand new house is finally ready, finished just yesterday, and it's the place he's been cherishing all along. Harold was about to get hit with the scariest surprise. His brand new dream house was suddenly in real danger. A fire ripped through, swallowed the home in blazing flames, and when the heat hit, Harold crumpled to his knees in pure disbelief. When Harold stared at his brand new dream home, panic hit like lightning. He burst into hysterics, crying in 3 wild streams while screaming at the top of his lungs that the house was on fire. And just like they say, the goddess of luck swoops in for anyone who's been dealt a misfortune. Harold stands there crushed on the ashes, trembling in shock, his eyes still brimming with tears, refusing to accept what he's seeing. While around him the city keeps moving, strangers sprinting through the streets and kids laughing as they run wild. The stunning cityscape with tidy houses and a far-off castle fades away, and suddenly you're stuck watching Harold trudge through the clamor with his shoulders slumped. After everything that happened, he moves like a broken machine, slow and hollow, staring at whatever's in front of him, still numb with shock. Harold halted in the middle of a chaotic crowd, stared at the people ahead with a heavy, dark stare, and that bright, cheerful Harold was gone, replaced by a sinking feeling that said, "It's all over and I don't even care what happens next." Harold can't stop wondering why this happened. Then he remembers how, when he came home from work yesterday, the fire was already blazing, so at least it wasn't his fault, but that still doesn't explain who started it and whether it was arson that struck out of nowhere. Harold looked worn out, mulling over one grim thought: if they were burning the house anyway, why not do it somewhere else? Then 2 guys pulled his attention, and one leaned in asking if the other had a magic sword. Harold stayed stone still as the guy with the magic sword bragged to the other person that he was headed straight for the middle-level maze to rake in money there. Then the listener blurted in shock, because Harold could tell they didn't believe a word they'd just heard. Harold keeps staring into a foggy haze, unheard and ignored, while you can still grab money in the maze. But for him, none of it matters because he's got 0 skill, no sword, no magic, and his strength and brains are painfully ordinary. Harold sighs like he's done this for too long, then remembers how he busted his butt for 25 years because he finally knew exactly what he needed. Gritting his fist like a promise, he makes his choice and commits. Harold tilts his head to the gray sky and lets out a crushing sigh, then blurts that he just wants money, because he's convinced that if he had enough, life wouldn't feel this miserable. With money on his mind, Harold let out a heavy sigh and wondered how much he had left, then rushed into the bank, turned to a specialist, and the girl at the counter calmly told him his balance, 15 million. Harold stares at his bank statement with a heavy heart, realizing $15 million a month is what a simple worker supposedly earns. Well, that's the only comfort he's got right now, and he can't even find words because he's been grinding his hardest and still feels stuck. Harold remembers it all back when, on top of his main job, he wrestled with brutal days picking mountain wild plants and medicinal herbs, then selling the whole load in bulk. Harold can't stop replaying it in his mind. He believes that all his hard work finally paid off. A whopping $2,000 million saved, and most of it went straight into building his dream home. With his eyes shut tight, Harold grumbled that the situation he'd landed in felt all wrong. Then, calm as ever, he told the bank clerk in front of him, "I'm pulling every single dollar from this account." With his bank account drained to nothing, Harold drifts back into the jam-packed streets, moving slow like the city can't decide if it's going to swallow him. Because even broke as he is, he's still determined to spend what's left right now. With a sad little smile stuck on his face, Harold drooped like a broken candle, head dipping low, eyes glinting as if the tears were about to spill again, thinking, numb and distant, that after the fire everything had collapsed into full, hopeless despair. Suddenly, Harold threw his hands up like he was celebrating for real, and he decided, no more getting knocked down, time to go grab something delicious. Then his eyes snagged a strange sign on the street and he stared at it in shock like, should I actually take this gamble and risk it for the money? But right when Harold steps closer, the sign yanks him in. No gambling games here. This is a slave auction. Harold just freezes, staring at it, torn over what he's supposed to do next. Then Harold finally understood the sign he'd been staring at for ages, and the words hit him like a punch. His jaw dropped at what it said. Sure, he'd heard rumors about slavery deals back home, but auctions like this were almost unheard of in this country. Seeing Harold stuck at the doorway, the auction manager swings around and addresses him. Harold greets him back, then hears, "You've come to a great place." The manager immediately asks if Harold will join the auction, and Harold freezes, completely thrown off, scrambling for words. The second Harold heard the auction manager's offer, worry hit him like a truck. He jerked back, flailed his hands, and blurted to the steward that he had zero money to buy some person at auction. Harold's thoughts snapped instantly. Slaves are just luxury items, and for some, the price never drops below 200 million. So when the manager offered him that, Harold nearly couldn't believe it, because the man seemed totally out of his depth compared to what Harold assumed about him. The auctioneer jerked his hands up like Harold had blindsided him, then warned him not to say that, because some lots at the auction start at a cool 1 million, and if Harold's lucky, the deal could rake in real profit for him. Harold blurted out to the auction manager, asking if the price wouldn't rise, then flicked his finger and grinned, replying that it all depended on one thing: whether Harold had any real rivals for the lot he wanted. The manager keeps going and tells Harold that sometimes the whole event rides on the opening price. If it's too low, the organizers feel the hit hard. Then he grins and says that's the best part of his job. All that pressure and unpredictability. Once again, the auction manager chased Harold down and demanded permission to speak, then beamed that everything would work out for sure, no pressure at all, just go inside, peek around, and don't buy a thing. Looks like Harold finally got his mind off the trouble. He narrowed his eyes, lost in thought, and figured it might be nice to just look around. Who cares if he buys anything or not? Either way, it's still interesting. Harold leans in and asks the steward if he has to pay for admission, and the auction manager's face lights up. He pats Harold on the shoulder like, "You don't have to pay a thing," then waves him straight inside. As the doors swing open, you see a huge hall with a raised floor and a stage, thick heavy curtains hanging on one side, and all kinds of people, men and women, sitting in a wide circle, ready for whatever happens next. Harold finally slips through the door, scanning the room like, "Wait, why am I here?" Then his confusion snaps into clarity as he spots the crowd and the stage dead center. This is the auction. Harold bursts through the door and totally freezes, scrambling to figure out where he is and what the heck is going on in that hall. Then he just stands there, unsure how to act like he belongs. Suddenly, Harold spotted a single empty seat in the crowd, like it was the last lifeline. He spun his head in disbelief, then sat down fast, realizing the manager must have called him out because the missing seats practically scream that there's no room to back down. Harold whips his head around in shock, and just like that, the auction manager's voice booms over the crowd, thanking all the ladies and gentlemen for making the time to show up for the auction. Boeing tells them, "You're not just workers, you're a world-traveling crew, hunting exciting new finds and then selling them at auction," and he even swears up and down, "I guarantee you'll all leave with something you'll love." Harold sat a little away from the stage and listened as a non-stop manager spilled every detail of the auction, and for some reason his brain immediately tagged him as a traveling merchant. Harold gets hit with a wave of sad memories about what just happened, then he forces a weak smile and thinks, "My precious house burned down, so why not chase the world for adventure and cash?" Meanwhile, the manager keeps the auction chatter rolling, tells the crowd exactly what's coming next, and promises that once the lot's presentation ends, he'll start taking cash bids from anyone desperate to get their hands on it. The auction manager bowed again, winked at the crowd from the stage, and announced that the named lot would go to whoever shot up their hand and shouted the biggest bid. The manager finally wrapped up the event rules, threw his arms wide like a showman, and announced, "Your auction starts now," just before he reveals the first lot. Right away, the manager dragged a girl onto the stage in a jaw-dropping outfit, and when Harold laid eyes on her, he erupted into a scream of pure amazement, locking his gaze on her like he couldn't blink. The first girl to step out? She wasn't human at all, she was an elf, straight out of a fairy tale, a total forest beauty. The manager leans in and tells the stunned crowd that elves are almost unheard of in big cities, and that's exactly why she's so mind-blowingly special. Harold blanked out on everything, gaped with shock, and just kept staring at the elf girl on the stage like he couldn't believe his eyes. He couldn't figure out how someone like her ended up at an auction like this. The manager lays it all out with pure confidence. She's stunning, deadly with magic, and fluent in the ancient elvish tongue. And trust me, no matter if you're an aristocrat, a merchant, or some hero on a mission, you'll never find anyone like her again. The auction manager wraps up his pitch, flashes a sly wink at the crowd, then booms that the lot he just described starts at a staggering $200 million, and Harold freezes in shock. Crowds ringed the stage and exploded into furious bidding. 300 million. Then 580 million. Someone shouted 1 billion, and before anyone could blink, another voice slapped down a staggering 2,900 million for the whole lot. Harold gapes in disbelief as the bidders slam in offers of $6.23 billion and $6.3 billion, and the manager yells at everyone to say, right now, who's going higher. After scanning the entire line of auction bidders, the manager slams the gavel and shouts that no one's topping the price. So the lot sells for a jaw-dropping $6.03 billion, and the steward immediately declares the winner. Joyfully smiling man in armor. The manager pushed the auction even deeper and Harold couldn't stop staring. It was all unreal. Sure, she was drop-dead gorgeous and undeniably strange, but somehow Harold never clocked her as something truly valuable. The auctioneer didn't stop for a second. He kept driving it forward, while the crowd around Harold burst into noise, yelling bids of 150 million, then 300 million, then 400 million, then 500 million, and finally 800 million. Harold slumps and listens as the manager roars and the empty hall spits his words back, and the numbers hit so fast and so painfully big that it seals the fate of that roof. Then the manager blasts out that the final lot is about to be held. When Harold heard the manager was about to reveal the very last batch, he nearly exhaled with relief, like it was finally done, until he snapped in total shock because that last lot was anything but normal. Everyone stared in pure shock. The steward's final copy had gone to a dark elf, and the manager, writing that win, boomed out loud asking who else wanted in. Meanwhile, the dark elf just stood there, drained and silent, letting the steward's voice wash over her as he introduced her. No words, no glance toward the hall, like none of it even mattered. The crowd that had been screaming with excitement at the auction suddenly went dead quiet, and you could see surprise, shock, and pure fear tearing across their faces. Once the first jolt faded, the hall erupted in nervous whispers. Everyone kept staring at her, demanding, "Is she really a dark elf?" People swear that reaching out to someone like her can cost you your life. The manager was already bracing himself for the crowd's happy buzz. Then, surprise, he caught their words about her and it hit him like a punch. In the hall, the crowd keeps grumbling with pure disgust, and Harold can't shake the feeling that elves have been pushing against the rest of the world for ages, because he understands why everyone's terrified of dark elves, the kind of creatures said to curse anyone who even dares to touch them. Harold still remembers from childhood that lots of children's parables and lesson stories are built on an old myth about dark elves, while in his country, grown-ups whisper that dark elves stalk naughty kids and rain down misery. Harold scans the room like he's hunting answers, and the moment his eyes land around, he realizes dark elves are way rarer than regular ones. But most people in this hall have no clue, and they keep trading grim tales about the horrors that follow anyone foolish enough to reach out and contact the dark elves. The steward is panicking. He leans in and tells everyone the elf is still young and pure-hearted, knows a bit of magic, can handle chores around the house, can tag along with a companion on wild adventures, and even has an absolutely killer sense of style. The room is thick with doubt. Everyone goes stone still. Nobody dares to meet the steward's eyes or the dark elf's, and then someone yells at the startled steward that on their continent dark elves are called unclean. The manager, fed up with the yelling and angry talks from the crowd, snaps back that things are handled differently across the continents, and that some folks actually swear innocent dark elves bring people lucky charm and fortune. Harold watches the steward gush to the crowd about the dark elf's great qualities, and he can't help thinking it feels like drawing lots, like he secretly hoped this elf would make waves. Harold stared at the steward, still stuck in his thoughts. He figured the man must have come from some other continent and didn't know the local rumors, and boy, did Harold misjudge how hard the northeastern folks hated the dark elves. The auction manager's nerves snapped. He finally understood he'd screwed up, but he couldn't stop talking. Face burning, eyes bulging, he blurted at the crowd that his service was top tier and insisted the starting bid for that lot was a measly 15 million. After the auction manager's words hit Harold like a punch to the chest, he's stunned all over again. Then he stares at it with pure awe, realizing this isn't just a sale to him, it's pride, and Harold lives for auctions like this. Then it hits Harold all at once. He blurts the manager's announced starting bid under his breath, and his stomach drops as he realizes it's only 15 million. Meanwhile, the auction manager hangs on every breath, desperate for the crowd to react, yet the whole hall locks up in terrifying silence, and he finally roars that not a single soul cares about his generous offer. That poor auctioneer was stuck in pure shock. He gawked with his terrifying stare because nobody would take his offer. Then boom, one calm guy raised his hand and tossed out 15 million like it was nothing. The whole hall packed up, gasping in disbelief. Everyone stared at the one guy bold enough to say yes to the manager's proposal. And the brave man, it was Harold, perched on the very edge of his seat. The crowd snapped out of it and erupted into noise, while Harold stayed seated, hand still raised like he was waiting for the world to blink. Then the hall exploded with shouts, people stunned that he might actually be serious, swearing no one could possibly dare make a move like this. The dark elf had every eye locked on them in that hall, lavished with praise by the steward and gossiped about with crackling excitement by everyone, yet they stayed completely silent. Harold slips his eyes away, feigning that he heard nothing and saw even less of the buzz around him, then cautiously meets the manager's gaze. He's sure it can't be a coincidence that he's sitting on exactly 15 million, but he's only come to take a look. Harold keeps his hand raised and tells himself privately and firmly, "I don't hate her," while also insisting he's not the type to swallow rumors about someone he's never even met. Harold's chest tightened with sudden sadness, like the rumors about that dark elf, even if they're true, can't possibly leave him with anything left to lose. The manager hears that someone in the hall just locked in the announced amount, and he bursts into excited gestures, waving wildly to pull everyone's eyes his way. Then he shouts the number again and urges them to join, warning that if they miss it, this chance won't come back. Even after the manager pushed every effort he had, the whole hall still traded cold, fearful looks. Nobody dared challenge the crowd's truth. The manager's despair hit the ceiling. He shut his eyes tight and roared that since nobody else backed the bet, the entire pot would slam down to Harold for a whopping $15 million, and everyone in the room froze in pure shock. The manager flips through the cash, says he raked in a cool $15 million, and tells Harold, "You're sitting on a win. This rare lot only cost $15 million, and in the West it would have hit $16 billion. Harold asked the manager to call off the deal, and the guy shot him down. Trust is the lifeblood of everything he does. This time the auction hit home, the numbers went through the roof, and he hauled in a fortune. Now he's ready to pass the whole acquisition to Harold. The steward slides up politely and tells Harold to spill a bit of his blood onto a special neck accessory, because later, Harold has to wear it to become Dark Elf. Harold blurts out to the steward, "What do I have to do?" And then he gets his answer fast, yeah, he really does need his blood. The steward confirms it's required for the imprinting procedure, the one that locks the Dark Elf under Harold's control. The manager promises this accessory lets him transform into a proper gentleman, touch it with his finger and a needle springs out, pricking him just enough to draw the blood they need for the procedure. But only Harold will be able to take the elf off. Harold is swallowed by pure worry, but he obeys the steward's orders, then steps in like a master and fastens the special accessory around the dark elf's neck, locking them together through the exact procedure. Harold locks eyes with the dark elf and calmly tells her that the moment he placed the succession stone on her, he became her master. The dark elf stares back with wide, shocked eyes, then bursts into amazement, nodding hard and thanking him like she can't believe what just happened. The dark elf, who'd been barely paying attention to everything, suddenly freezes, then leans in, wide-eyed, as she stares at herself in the accessory her so-called master just slid onto her. Harold gave her a friendly smile, glanced at the dark elf in front of him, and casually told her he still didn't know her name, then shock hit her like a punch. The dark elf looks totally lost, like shock is still freezing her in place, but she can't stop staring at Harold. She hesitates, then finally tells him, "My name is A.T." With that friendly smile still glued on, Harold shot the young dark elf a sly wink and said, "Your name is so cute, I'm Harold." Full name, Harold Smith. A dark elf named Addie stared at him with wide, open eyes and called him Harold Sama in her own strange way. Then she leaned in harder like she was dying to ask him something, but swallowed the courage and held back. But Harold couldn't shake it. Addie, the dark elf, had been locking eyes with him for ages, not once looking away. He snapped to a stop, stunned, then hesitated just a breath before asking what was wrong, like something might have happened to her. When Addie, the young dark elf, caught herself staring at Harold, embarrassment hit her like a punch he'd noticed. She spun away fast, forcing a "I'm totally fine," and Harold started to read the truth on her face, but then she blurted out, "I'm just glad you're okay," like that would fix everything. For the first time since fate shoved Harold together with that dark elf girl, she looked straight at him and smiled. No fear, no hesitation, just bold confidence in her eyes. Harold snapped to it in an instant. His dream house had burned to the ground just yesterday and he'd lost everything, yet somehow things weren't as hopeless as he'd feared. His life flips overnight, no plan, no warning, and suddenly a dark elf girl named Addie is his companion, tied to him forever by the imprinting procedure. Harold's hands shot in from nowhere, clamped onto the sides of the startled dark elf Addie, and in a flash he whipped a hooded cloak over her, hiding her exotic look from every nosy eye. Addie snapped her hands up in defense, trying to cover her ears because she didn't want them seen. Then she froze when she realized Harold had already done it by yanking the hood over her head. He grinned at her, then nodded right along with her words. Out of nowhere, Harold and Addie both snapped their heads forward, stunned, because they'd already ditched the auction room and were standing right on the city street. Harold Danetti spotted a smug armored man beaming as he waved to everyone like he owned the place, and right beside him stood a stunning elf girl, brows knitted in a sharp, angry frown. The beautiful elf walking beside that smug knight who also hit the auction looked straight up worried from the start, and then, right on the street, something she spotted made her anger boil over. Addie strode with Harold past the armored man and his elf companion, then spun away in pure irritation to dodge that stare, only for the other elf to wheel around too the moment she spotted them coming. Harold stared at her with a mute question in his eyes, totally stunned, and Addie rushed in to explain. She insisted it wasn't a big deal, the dark elves just don't mesh with ordinary elves and that's why this mess was happening. Harold studied AT closely, catching the confusion in his eyes as he clung to that cloak, and a chilling thought hit him. Maybe this had nothing to do with the moment at all and everything to do with the whole dark elf race. Harold sank into even darker thoughts and the pain on his face gave everything away. He had no clue what to do next, he just wanted to go home, but that wasn't something he could make happen on its own. Addie got yanked out of her thoughts about meeting a regular elf on a packed street, then she stared hard at Harold, only for him to hesitate, stumble over his words and mumble something she couldn't even make out. Harold's cheeks burn as he tells Addie, "I can't bring you to my place, my house went up in flames and I blew my last money at an auction where I just met you. So yeah, that also means you can't crash in any hotel either." Harold's eyes lit up. He blurted out to Addie that he suddenly remembered an abandoned hut at the foot of the mountain, empty and untouched, and he couldn't help but pitch the idea that he and the dark elf Addie could spend the night there today. After Harold's rambling, confused explanations, Addie leans in, flat out tells him nothing's wrong, then locks eyes with him and pulls herself deeper into the cloak he handed her earlier in the city. Harold froze, eyes wide with sudden realization, then stared hard at Addie's plain-looking, yet oddly revealing dark elf outfit, and you could feel her squirming because it made her feel completely uneasy. The young dark elf's entire outfit is basically a bargain dress, a few bangles, and the same cloak Harold yanked onto her the moment they stormed out of the auction. So when Addie looks up at him, she asks with the blunt honesty of a kid, "What's wrong, Harold?" Now it was Harold's turn to squirm with embarrassment. He realized the exam got pushed back, so he jerked his gaze away from her body, snapped to his partner that she was fine, and blurted that he should go grab some normal clothes for her. Young Addie stared at her outfit like it had just stunned her, then ran her hands over the dress and sized up every detail, before finally looking up at Harold and declaring, after a brief pause, that she honestly doesn't need him to buy her anything new. Harold blurts out a nervous laugh, remembering his own mess, and tells Addie he doesn't actually have the money for this. Then he swears they'll be okay and promises he'll figure something out. Harold abruptly shut his mouth, stunned by what he just confessed to the dark elf Addie standing right there. Like, did he really tell her everything was fine and even swear he'd come up with something? When Harold snaps back to himself, a secret smile creeps onto his face, because he can finally see how wild he looked in front of Addie, the dark elf he just ran into at the auction, and he can't stop thinking about everything that's unfolding. Still smiling, Harold tells himself that losing his home hasn't crushed him, it's even nudged his life forward, and he can't believe he's already starting to bounce back from that tragedy. Now he just wants to know what Addie would want. Dark elf Addie listened to every word her master, Harold said, then shook her head and told him, "Not right now, but later, I'm going to need weapons and armor and I'll really mean it." Hearing that, Harold froze, eyes wide as he stared at her, Addie clutched her fists and snapped that if there's no money then they're hitting the maze. Maybe they won't go far but they can still grab some cash there. With fists clenched, Dark Elf Addie leans in and tells Harold she's actually been through mazes before, so even if they end up going together, it doesn't mean they'll be left broke or empty-handed. Her words about the maze hit Harold like a jolt, and suddenly everything came rushing back. What the steward said about the Dark Elf owning magic and knowing how to beat mazes, plus that other convo he overheard about two guys who could make you money in the middle of the maze. Blushing, Addie admits it's painfully clear to her dark elves don't belong in places like this, so she took a big risk and figured it would be a problem for her to just come in and work for Mr. Harold. Addie whipped around and told Mr. Harold, "Watch me," then dropped into a quick bend, snatched a perfectly sized pebble off the ground and moved like she'd done it 100 times, while Harold just stayed silent. With a blur of skill, Addie, the tiny dark elf, snagged a stone and whipped it through the air in one clean, practiced swing, launching it up into the sky and dropping the bird that was flying past like it never stood a chance. A young dark elf dropped him out of the sky with a fierce strike, and the bird crashed straight into Harold's feet, right through his bones, leaving him so stunned he couldn't even breathe out a word, just frozen there, staring at his companion's shocking move. Still rooted to the spot, Harold stared down at the bird at his feet, eyes bulging, and finally blurted in shock, was his companion seriously joking, because those skills sounded wildly impressive in his mind. The dark elf blurts that it turned into a total mess, awkward as anything, so she only managed to snag one bird. If she'd had a weapon like a bow, she would have had at least 3 birds hooked at once. Harold figures he'll finally pick up a bit more about magic, and that Addie might actually make it through the maze, so he tells her to start getting ready right now because no matter how confident she feels, that place is brutal, and if things get too hard she needs to fall back and save herself because surviving comes first. Harold says, "I don't want to get hurt, so watch yourself," and Addie, still totally confused, just grins and tells him not to worry because Harold Sama will be protected no matter what. Once the chat ends, they break into motion, walking out into the road. He trails her toward the forest hut and that smiling Harold just can't hide his confusion, thinking, is this really the first time I've ever seen the dark elf, smile like this? Suddenly, Harold's mind snapped to a terrifying idea. He'd better change his face and figure out what she meant when she promised to protect him. And then, would he really have to march into that maze and battle the dark elf there too? When Harold finally stumbles upon a tiny hut tucked among trees at the mountain's base, he leans in to Addie the elf and tells her, "No one's living here anymore, but look around, it's spotless inside and out." Harold was the one watching this hut, he even slipped in sometimes, and when he finally explained it, a stunned Addie listened as he said that before he managed to earn himself a real house, this place helped him survive. He gathered wild herbs and plants here to sell them. The dark elf Addie stared at Harold, fists clenched, and told him with full seriousness that she'd start cooking for them right away since the hut had dishes and a stove. Harold nodded and agreed with his young companion Addie. Done with the chaos of the day, the dark elf Addie curled up by the stove after eating, and within seconds she fell asleep, so exhausted from everything she'd pushed through today and so drained along with him. Harold grins as he watches her sniff so peacefully, then, realizing she's sleeping, he grabs a blanket and gently tucks it over the young elf he's somehow bound to, all because of those wild, strange events from earlier. Suddenly, the dark elf Addie jolted awake like a light switch. Turns out her sleep never really stuck. Red in the face, she stared at Harold as he approached, and the look on her face left him just as stunned. Harold is on edge. He shoots the dark elf a guilty little smile and blurts, "Everything's okay, right?" Then he quickly swears he wasn't about to do anything weird, he just brought a blanket to cover her up. Frozen in stunned silence, dark elf Addie shoots Mr. Harold a shaky, confused thanks for caring, because at first, she's terrified of what could happen next. When the dark elf Addie finally sensed everything was okay and that Harold only wanted to take care of her, she dozed off again, pulling the blanket he brought up around herself. Then Harold grinned, looked at her and said, "There she goes again, you've fallen asleep." Staring at the dark elf's back, Harold spots A.T. dozing by the stove and it hits him. She's still terrified, ready for an attack any second. If that's true, then Harold has to stay even sharper. With a slow, careful hand, Harold plucks a strand of hair off Addie's face while she sleeps soundly. Because even in her dreams, he can tell she's still terrified someone might touch her, and since she's a servant, he figures she should be ready for whatever comes next. Harold keeps his eyes locked on Addie, the sleeping young dark elf in front of him, her face calm as a dream, bangs hiding half her expression, and that same necklace accessory resting near her neck, the one that ties her directly to Harold. Staring at the sleeping young elf's face for too long, Harold's mind spiraled into total confusion. He shuddered, grimaced, and raked his fingers through his hair like he could shake off those dark elf thoughts before they swallowed him. Above the trees, a terrifying roar rumbled like a whole pack of armored feet pounding the ground, getting louder by the second. When Addie the dark elf heard it, she jolted awake and Harold's body went tight with tension. A whole squad of armored warriors is stomping through the forest, heading somewhere no one knows, thundering so loud even the birds scatter, shaking Otzi and Harold awake inside their forest hut. Harold stepped out, followed the racket, and slipped behind the trees to watch the crowd move, only to realize it was an entire squad of Imperial soldiers, and Harold hasn't heard a thing about it. What the hell is brewing in the east? When Harold finally hauled everyone back to the hut, he spilled everything he'd seen nearby in the forest, right after Addie snapped awake, and admitted he still can't figure out what's going down in the Empire, or if this will blow up into a full-scale war. Over breakfast, the dark elf 8 sat right on the floor, eyes locked on Harold as he spilled what he saw in the forest, then admitted he worried about life out in the country. And after hearing every word, 8 leaned in and told him straight up that even a little of it was downright frightening. Harold can't believe something like that would scare her. He stares at her for a second, then blurts out that maybe his dark elf buddy Addie should tag along and they should head to some other place far from here. Addie freezes at the question, then cautiously asks if Harold's really sure this can even happen. Harold just smiles, calm and confident. Yeah, everything's fine, they only need to earn enough money to travel. Harold pushed again and asked the dark elf Addie where she'd want to go on a trip, and this time Addie shut her eyes tight, sank into thought and went quiet for what felt like minutes. And then, like she'd made up her mind, she leaned forward, stared at Harold with burning intensity and demanded to know if this was even possible. Because if it was, she was dying to head to the southern part of the continent. Ystardi Canyon. Harold shot back, all right, then we go there. He swore the best route was the ferry and told him that to profit inside the maze he'd need AT, yet all he still had was his late father's spear. Dark elf Addie stares hard at Harold and demands if he isn't curious about what waits ahead. He squints back, then admits she's right, because now he's locked in, dying to know what's hiding inside that maze. Then Harold eyed the elf Addie and made up his mind. He dropped down beside her on the floor and the sudden closeness stunned her. With a steady voice, he declared that Addie was now his servant. She hesitated, stunned by the claim, but the truth hit, and she finally agreed. Suddenly, Harold cupped Addie's dark elven cheek and her blush flared as he told her, straight up, that she couldn't just walk away. Then he gently lifted her chin and promised he wasn't letting her go. After those words, Harold stepped in and pressed a gentle kiss on the confused dark elf Addie, then panic hit like a spark. He went betrayed, jolted upright and yanked his hair into place, blurting that the whole point was simple. If she wanted to speak, she should, because she mattered to him more than anything. Dark elf Addie froze in stunned silence for a few heartbeats, then Harold's kiss hit her like a storm and every wild emotion exploded across her face. Harold slurred out of confusion as Addie scrambled to line up her thoughts and force out something coherent. Then she blushed so hard it burned, asking him, trembling, if his words meant she was important now and not just his servant anymore. Harold chose to say nothing for now, stood with his back to Addie, and she didn't even glance at him. She just kept sitting there, processing every second of what had just happened between her and Mr. Harold. Young dark elf Addie's eyes went cloudy, heat of embarrassment, a flash of light or maybe even shame, so she squinted sideways, replaying what just happened and scrambled to find the words to match her feelings. At last, dark elf 8 finally gathered her thoughts, still mortified, cheeks burning red. She pressed her fingers to her lips and in a quiet whisper to herself she swore, "Wait, that really was my first kiss." To kick off his training, Harold headed into the city to earn money, and when he stood right outside a shop he knew, shame hit him hard. Still, even with that crushing despair dragging him down, he forced himself to get back to work. Storming into the shop, Harold tells himself he's gotta earn his way through the maze, work here a bit, then get out. He's sweating hard, praying they won't snap at him. Right then, the shopkeeper pops up, and Harold and the man burst into surprised chuckles. Out of the inner room burst the shopkeeper, and his face twisted so hard it turned into a terrifying mask. Harold froze, terror punching through him, and his thoughts spiraled as he started begging the gods. But just like that, instead of chewing Harold out, the shopkeeper broke down in tears, shoved open the distance with a rush of hugs, and sobbed in pure joy, "It's you, you're alive." The shopkeeper started to groan that Harold should have warned him before barging in like that, and he admitted he'd felt something was off, so he rushed to Harold's new house, only to find it already gone up in flames. Once the shopkeeper finally cooled off, he and Harold slipped into the back room and talked it all through, everything that had happened to him over the last few days, until the shopkeeper paused, took a breath, and admitted he finally understood everything. After everything he heard, the shopkeeper leans in and says, "So that's it, Harold was gonna earn his living by heading into the maze." But then Harold just can't wrap his head around why he needed money just to train for it. The shopkeeper can't wrap his head around it. Why is Harold pushing to sail back to the southern continent? Harold stalls for a beat, then finally snaps back that it has to be done, but he won't spill any details, and yeah, he's probably keeping quiet about that dark elf he saw at the auction. The shopkeeper squinted hard, let out a heavy sigh, and admitted, straight up, that Harold was probably dealing with something he couldn't explain right here and now. Then the shopkeeper snapped up and rushed off, telling the stunned Harold to stay right there and wait for him, don't wander. So Harold just stared after him, confused, yet somehow went along with it. When Harold came back, the shopkeeper snapped a solid bag of cash onto the table right in front of him, then announced it was for him. So Harold blurted out in shock, instantly followed by heartfelt thanks for such an insanely generous gift. Harold looked worried, then thanked the shopkeeper with a polite smile and a hint of guilt, explaining that when a teacher does right by a student, the student always pays it back, because good doesn't disappear, it comes back to the one who started it. The shopkeeper's eyes don't blink. He tells Harold that this is the exact money he had set aside for him from the start, and if Harold keeps saying he's leaving soon, then the shopkeeper figures he has to hand it over right now. The shopkeeper tells Harold he spent 15 hard years running the shop and this money is basically a small send-off, and Harold is so moved his eyes fill with tears, he rushes over to thank the owner for everything. Harold-sama is back at the forest hut and the dark elf Addie comes at him like, "You're home." Right away, Harold spots the glorious fried chicken and can't help but praise Addie for cooking him up a meal. Harold grins at Addie, thanks her, then snaps a surprised elf out of his shock by saying he's earned some money, and tomorrow he and Addie are going to buy weapons for the maze. To finish it off, Harold pulls out a small present for Addie and shoves it into her hands right away. Addie stared at Harold's gift, stunned and amazed. It was a tiny cute hat. Harold leaned in and said it was meant to cover her ears from nosy eyes, or maybe she'd just want to pick a different hat. Dark elf Addie cranes her head, confused, as the Herald grins at her from behind her brand new hat, and she's caught off guard just for a second before she stammers out her thanks, telling him she loves everything he gave her and swearing she'll guard that hat with every ounce of strength. The very next day, Harold and his dark elf pal Addie stormed into the gun store, and right away, chaos hit as they struggled to pick the perfect weapon since every model had its perks and its flaws, leaving Harold totally stuck on what to say. The dark elf, Addie, and Harold leaned in close at the gun store, scanning every weapon on those wall racks and counters, because here, every occasion has its perfect blade or gun waiting. After combing through every last item in the store, Addie, a dark elf, locks in her pick and tells Harold, who's still reeling from the huge selection, that she's already chosen right from everything they've got here. With a tight grip on a serious, scope-sighted weapon, the dark elf Addie leans in and tells her master, Harold, that this is the perfect tool for their upcoming trip into the labyrinth. The dark elf Addie stood at the counter, eyes locked on her target, and froze the seller in stunned silence, rifle with a telescopic sight gripped in her hands like it was nothing, as she confidently told Mr. Harold that she'd made her decision and wanted this exact weapon. That smiling salesman in the shop seems totally thrilled with her pick. Then he leans in and asks, like it matters, if she truly wants that sniper rifle, because if she does, it's going to run Harold and her a whopping $50,000. Harold's thrilled until he grumbles that AT could have picked a pricier weapon, and the dark elf just calmly tells him the truth. The cost is exactly why she chose this kind of blade to take into the maze. A TT leans in and tells Harold she's been craving a firearm all along. Then she flicks her eyes to the weapon by the wall and explains that this magic bow will hit harder than any ordinary gun, but that's not the real reason. Harold snapped his eyes to the wall, magic bows hanging there, and his jaw dropped when he saw they were worth a staggering 6-8 million, while Addie just smirked and nodded like she knew the score, saying firearms get a bonus because they pack power, even when they're cheap. As he keeps breaking it down for Harold, he tells her they'll still need ammo for the weapon she's picked, but the final price will stay worth it, especially if they don't waste it on nothing. The rifle hits like a cannon, way too loud, and lining up your shot is harder than with a bow, but she shrugs and says, "Yeah, it's got flaws and we can fix the parts that make all that noise," because Addie honestly is a born sharpshooter. Harold just stands there, stunned as the dark elf Addie rattles off every weapon's perks and flaws with non-stop confidence, and then, right in front of him, he realizes she's being calm with him now. Harold froze when he realized his dark elf companion, despite her youth, was totally hooked on weapons, and that made him light up inside. As all those thoughts crashed into him, he grinned again and a hot blush spread across his cheeks. Harold blurts to Addie, his voice bright with excitement, that since she's agreed, they're grabbing this sniper rifle with a telescopic sight, and he insists she should also take a silencer so they can move in silence. When Mr. Harold tossed out that offer, Elf Addie's fists shot tight with pure excitement, her eyes glittering as she practically begged him, "Are you really sure?" And Harold answered like it was the easiest yes in the world. Standing at the counter, Addie dipped her head to Mr. Harold, thanking him for his generosity with a shaky, confused smile, and promising, right there, that she'd be useful and make the most of everything he'd just picked out for her. At last, AT and Harold locked in their picks, and the list was pure danger. A sniper rifle for 50,000, 20 sets of cartridges for 20,000, cartridge belts for 20,000, leather gloves for 10,000, and a silencer priced at 80,000. Harold watches the dark elf AT beam with satisfaction. She's already dressed in full gear, wearing a brand new dress with a sniper rifle slung over her shoulder. And AT cheerfully declares that everything's good and she's ready to go. Suddenly, the elf at tie spun around, her cheeks flushing when she realized her master, Harold, had been standing right behind her in total silence, just waiting for her to wrap up her preparations for the maze. Harold keeps smiling to himself, but ATC clocks it instantly. His clothes and gear are totally different from hers. Harold's dressed plain and cheap, and all he brought with him is his father's old spear. Red-faced with panic, the elf Addie blurts out she's just trying to talk. She insists Harold Sama is her master and she's his servant, but the way Harold carries himself screams that he doesn't belong in that role at all. Harold blinks in shock, staring at the dark elf with a blank face like he can't even process her words, and Addie presses on, telling him he should have kept his own focus on finding the best accessories for her. Harold finally got it, what his elf companion had been trying to say. He lifted his hand like, "Wait, I'm with you," then explained that with their budget still stretched thin, the smart move is to arm her first and get her the gear she needs, because she already knows what she's doing. He steadies himself, claiming that if they still have a few bucks left, he'll grab something for himself. She presses him again, asking if he's really sure, and Harold insists he is, even while knowing his current stuff is a full-on outrage. Harold grips his plain weapon with both hands, forcing a brave fighting stance and a grin. Then he realizes the spear only asterisk looks deadly from the outside, because up close it's anything but. And unlike Addie's gear, his stuff is so cheap it's practically daring him to fail. Harold realizes he's too weak to fight, so he grabs that spear as his only shot, but in the maze, weapons like that shatter fast and he can't even tell if he'll manage to use it at all. Standing right beside Addie, Harold leans in and tells her the truth. This maze isn't just some trap. It's the kingdom's own grip on the route they're headed for, because a place crawling with monsters would wreck the safety of the whole region. Harold keeps going, talking straight to Addie, and says the scary truth. When adventurers push deeper into this maze, they sometimes walk out as the new owners of the demon treasures they dug up inside. Their mission is simple and brutal. Wipe out as many monsters as they can, keep the beasts trapped inside the maze, and save the kingdom's peace from being shattered. After wrapping up his quick explanation of what Harold actually knows about the maze and its dangers, he locks eyes with Ishin and says, "This is just how it is. This is how we're getting to where we're meant to go." Harold couldn't stop wishing his father would finally spill everything about that maze, the twists, the traps, and the deadly dangers waiting for anyone who steps inside. Harold can still taste his childhood every day of spear training, yet no matter how hard he pushed, his father kept cutting him down, saying he wasn't cut out for it, so Harold grew certain the maze and the coming battles were never meant for him. Harold's heart sinks as he remembers his father didn't just live, he chased this maze like his whole purpose, and that's why everyone in the world knew his name. And Harold still remembers it clear as day. 15 years ago, his father, just like always, marched into the maze with his research and never came back because once you vanish from that maze, it only means one thing. You died inside. His dad's research was all about reaching the maze's deepest heart. But Harold just wanted him to make money the safer way, because who in their right mind walks into a tight maze with a spear in hand? As a kid, Harold was so weak he could barely stand, and when his father vanished inside the maze, his mother broke completely, then died, leaving Harold stranded all alone. Harold grimly replayed the moment he begged Beale Fatty to never risk herself in the maze and to turn back the second she couldn't handle it. And now, before he's even stepped inside, he's already sure he's not going to make it. Harold's heavy, heartbreaking memories of the past and the cruel, untimely loss of his parents got yanked to a stop when Addie's worried voice cut in, asking if Harold Sama's hair was okay. Harold snaps back when he realizes he's getting swallowed by the memories, then he flashes a smile, blurts that everything's okay, and thanks her for knowing all that. But AT turns bright red from how praised she is. Harold's next praise slipped out so suddenly that the dark elf snapped into embarrassment. She clenched her fists, looked away, blushed hard, and begged him not to say stuff like that again. At last, Harold and the elf Addie finally hit the right spot, and Harold grins like he struck gold, saying, "This is it, the maze." He can't believe how many people are lining up to get inside, and just as Addie stands there, silent and locked in, a voice suddenly rips through the crowd. Someone shouts at them to wait. A man strode up to Harold and Addie, and Harold clocked his gear instantly. This was the guardian posted over the maze, not some random bystander, and he asked straight up if you really had to pay admission. The guardian tells them admission is free, then snaps, "Just pay attention, there's one tiny problem," and Harold and Otzi stare in total confusion, not a clue what he means. The guardian says it plain, they just learned a terrifying monster is loose, stalking the maze right now. The guardian gathered the knights for a full hunt, but the monster vanished, so with no sign of him and no new showdowns, the search got shut down, yet you still have to stay on high alert, and then the herald leans in and whispers something straight into Addie's ear. He leans in and asks what Addie thinks. She shrugs and says if it's just one or two monsters, then maybe, and even though she's messed up before, this time is different. She tightened her fist like she meant it, telling him to stay sharp in the maze. Then someone shrieked about a monster, and doom suddenly felt seconds away. Harold and 8Yar's jaws dropped as a crowd suddenly surged straight for the maze entrance, shoving past everyone, including the guard, like they own the place. The newcomers clock Harold and Addie and immediately brand them as trouble, then urge them to turn around and head home, right now. One of the young men sneers at Harold, smirking, "So what kind of spear is that?" and then pushes the point like, yeah, Harold really chose to go into the maze with him. They kept needling Harold and even dragged Edwin Smith into it like, "Guess we loved him once, right?" But the truth hit hard, Smith is dead, so there's no reason to admire him anymore. Harold's in full shock. Are they really talking about Edwin Smith? Because that's his dead father's name, the Maze Explorer. Harold was mulling over the legendary pioneers' names when, boom, he noticed the same young man staring at Addie, and he couldn't help thinking she looked unbelievably cute in that hat. With all decency gone, he spots her massive uniform and thinks, yeah, that's exactly his type. Then he boldly tells her to ditch Harold, and the second it lands, Harold's face twists into something terrifying. With a brutal lunge of his spear, Harold drove the tip straight to the young man's neck, and the arrogant kid wheezed, half in terror, half in rage. With a terrifying scowl, Harold snarls at the screaming scoundrel, putting his eye on his woman and finishing him off still isn't enough. And the young man's accomplices just stand there, frozen in shock. Harold broods with dread, knowing every choice brought him here and there's no point pretending it's shocking. Then the thugs snap back, claiming they were just messing around, and Addie stands right behind him, totally fine. Harold locks eyes with Addie, thrilled, like he just landed a punchline she never saw coming. Then he flashes a quick mental apology and prays everything turns out okay. He yanks the weapon away from the insolent man's throat and snaps that, in this moment, he can't stay silent, then tells Addie to step into the maze right now, and she agrees without a second thought. Harold's rejection leaves those insolent men gaping as he storms off. One swears it's over, but the other can't bring himself to believe it. They're still calling Harold a beginner, but nobody wants to get cocky again, because just now one slip and he could have ended one of them. Meanwhile, Harold and Addie step into the maze and Harold flashes her a confident smile. He leans close and tells her, "Everything's going to be okay, I'm here, I'm right beside you." The moment they step into the maze, they blurt out in pure amazement and it's truly jaw-dropping. Then Harold strolls in like he owns the place and casually asks, "So, this is really the maze?" Harold grins at how the floor and walls gleam and Addie tells him it's the labyrinth's own light. Then she freezes, remembers something and calls his name like she's about to reveal a secret. Addie blushes hard and blurts that she was insanely happy in that moment, so when Harold stares at her, shocked, he asks again. Addie's cheeks flare red as she blurts out she's shocked he called her woman, but Harold can't catch a single word, he's just relieved she isn't mad. Right in front of Harold's shocked eyes, Addie dropped into a comfy stance and launched a lightning-quick, dead-on shot deep inside the maze. She keeps staring down the corridor begging for some sign, yet it's dead silent like the place is holding its breath. Then she grabs Harold's attention and says she injured someone in there and his face instantly turns into pure shock. A bit farther down that corridor they finally spotted it, a monster laid flat and she had taken a brutal hit. Harold grinned and said it was awesome because he didn't even realize it happened. Addie soaks up the praise, but it's only a tiny monster and with her sharp hearing and razor eyesight she's way more dangerous than they think. Harold knew she could handle herself, just not this well. He leans in and asks, ready to push even deeper into the maze. The tea shot back to the shocked Harold that she'd somehow slipped into the maze's middle, but she couldn't have done it alone. Then the monster croaked. Harold gets what she's hinting at, so he blurts out, "Did you have any friends before?" But she goes mute, and when the silence drags on, he panics and calls her name again. After a brief, tense hush, Addie leans in and tells the startled Harold, "Back on the western continent, I had friends." Crouched beside the beaten monster, they talk, and she tells Harold the western continent once had a band of explorers made up of nothing but women. AT says she was thrown into that research team, but there's a hidden detail there she won't dare explain. Harold catches on fast, tells a baffled Addie, "I shouldn't have asked," and says, "If you don't want to talk, you don't have to." AT shoots Harold a grateful look. He's been kind to her, and now she finally feels it's time to spill everything to him. She finally leaned in and told him everything. Then that head fell in love and handed that lucky someone most of their profits. Sure, they mined like crazy, but it still wasn't enough for him to stay fed all the time. One day, Addie gets knocked out with sleeping pills, then wakes up already sold off to a man running illegal business, and Harold can't believe what he's hearing. 8 snaps to the shocked Harold and tells him she'd already heard a rumor. An innocent maiden from the Dark Elf family could be worth an insane fortune. Harold tells her he's crushed that this happened, and he's furious at how her leader screwed everything up. Addie fumbles with her fingers and stammers that if her boss had handled things differently back then, that disaster never would have happened. Addie realizes this, if not she never would have crossed paths with her gentle master, Harold-sama, and now, Harold is shocked all over again. Harold is blown away and Addie snaps that if she'd run into someone else instead of him, and it turned out they were awful, she'd still end up hating everything from her past. Harold's jaw drops at her words, because he swears he can't believe she just said that. Then he winces, realizing far too little time has gone by and he can't even remember ever being a good master. Then Harold snaps into action. He decides he's done being stuck, pushes himself to the limit and starts by skinning the defeated monster. Staring at Harold's work, AT blurts out, confused, then she realizes she gets her old boss's feelings now. Addie keeps pushing the point, if her heart ever locks onto Harold-sama, she'll do anything for him without hesitation. Harold and Addie press deeper into the maze and Addie just won't stop. She unloads non-stop shots at every monster that comes crawling their way. 8 rips the monsters apart and Harold hacks them to pieces. Turns out the skins are insanely heavy, so he grinds out, "We've got to get home fast." Then 8 shouts his name at the top of his lungs. Addie grabs Harold's attention and tells him straight up that there's a door right ahead and it might be packed with treasures, and Harold just can't make sense of it. Harold started to say they'd had enough for today, but when it turned out they weren't done yet, he nodded and agreed to check what was behind that door, then they'd bolt right back. AT agrees. Addie flicks his hands in a blur of magic and boom, huge butterflies erupt into the air, fluttering all around them. Harold stares, stunned. Confused about what's happening, he blurts out to Addie, "What are you doing?" And she smiles, saying she made these butterflies using her magic. Addie beams and says she's trained the butterflies to snap at any spot where trouble lurks, so they'll shut down right at the danger tracks. Harold lets out a joyful cry. At eye contact with Harold, Addie blurted that she had plenty of spells in her pocket, only none of them she could unleash in a real fight, and right then she spotted a butterfly. Addie's warns that even more traps are ahead, so yeah, there might still be treasures waiting for you, while Harold isn't convinced that she believes nobody's been here before, and Addie's just nods back, saying that since so many people are up on the upper levels, they're not alone. Addie insists this treasure might have just shown up here, and Harold can't believe it, staring like, wait, how on earth did it appear so recently? She says Harold got it right, people believe the labyrinth has a mind of its own, and once the treasure's yanked away, it erases this place for days. Over time, the maze shuffles the treasure to new spots and locks in traps, then Harold pauses, staring at the walls as rumors spread. The maze doesn't just hide wealth, it spawns monsters too. It's a mystery box with teeth. After they slip past the traps, Harold and Addie burst through the door, he barks for them to move, and they step into a huge open room with a raised platform dead center. Harold stares at the object sitting on that raised platform, and his gut screams one thing: this is absolutely a priceless artifact. Staring at the thing right in front of him, Harold figures it's a cursed dagger, or at least something just as dangerous, and Aisha nods hard. This is a rare drop meant for high-level trouble. Harold tells Addie, "You've already figured out I don't know the maze," then leans in and asks what she thinks they should do next with the dagger. Addie says it all hinges on what kind of magic powers the curse. Sure, you can use magic items, but if those items are built on pure harmful curses, they won't be able to use them or sell them. Harold says let's leave it alone for now until we know what kind of curses we're dealing with, and urges everyone to steer clear of trouble. Then he snaps, "Is the dagger expensive?" And Addie answers, "Yeah." Addie blurts out that this dagger's price could buy a whole house, right as Harold's jaw drops in disbelief. And then the big question hits: is that blade really worth the dream home he's been saving up for 15 years? Addie tells them if they can keep pulling profit at the bottom levels, they'll have a whole month covered, but if fate smiles, they might even get the full amount in one shot. Harold hears it and freezes in pure shock. Harold figures they can't buy a house yet just by selling a dagger, so don't sweat it, earn your cash the safe way, because all they really need is money for travel. Addie nods right along. After striking that deal, Harold and his companion, the dark elf Addie, burst into smiles at the same time. Harold and Addie burst out of the maze clutching the monster skins, and right outside the tension was buzzing with non-stop movement and chatter. Harold and Addie skidded to a stop right at the crowd's edge, staring in disbelief at the chaos ahead, like they can't figure out what's happening or why everyone's losing their minds. Turns out the whole commotion was sparked by the armored man, the Count's third son, still traveling with that elf by his side, and everyone's whispering he's headed for the labyrinth. Harold spotted both of them instantly. Harold stares at the Earl's son and his escort, and it hits him, yeah, that really was her back then. The Count's boy is acting way too bold, shouting that the elf is his servant and bragging about her right in front of the entire crowd. The Count's son acts like a brute. He shoves the elf hard and demands she name her master in front of everyone, and that humiliation sparks pure shame and fury in her. The Count's son shoves the elf heart back again hard, making her wince in pain, yet she still insists that her master is the Count's son. He just erupts in laughter and keeps bragging to the crowd. Harold was furious at the Earl's son's actions. He couldn't believe the guy would pull something like this, and he swore the elf had to strike back. Then it hit him. This was tied to the exact same process as 8, and that meant it just couldn't happen. The Earl's son can't stop smirking. He keeps bragging that his elf is stunning and magic at the highest level. The Count's cheeky son suddenly yanked the elf into his grip, confident she'd be his key in the maze and the kind of entertainment that keeps him smiling all night. High off the crowd's cheers, the Count's son brags that none of the people here deserve his maid's body, then smugly announces he'll let them hear how she entertains him. Addie, stuck in the back row, leans in and tells Harold, "Too many people, I'm totally blocked, I can't see a thing about what's happening up there." Harold shoots back that she doesn't need to witness any of this, tells AT to get out of there, and though she can't even explain why, she still follows his lead, because what she just saw left a sour ache in her chest. Harold and Addie tore away from the maze and the roaring crowd, then hauled their loot straight into the city to sell everything they'd pulled from inside. Harold and Addie rolled up to the Naples Trading Company because he'd been here before, and he knew they always pay for every item they pull out of the maze. Then an employee stepped in to greet him. Harold greets him back, and the employee, Tasusan, introduces himself with a polite smile, then asks what Harold needs exactly and what he can do for him. Tasusan's jaw drops when he spots Harold's skins hiding from the maze. He never thought Harold would abandon everything to hunt around in there and finally explain how this happened. Harold spills that everything's gone sideways for him and he needs cash just to reach the southern continent. Tasusan nods along like, yeah, that checks out, and won't pry for anything extra. Tasusan calmly valued every skin Harold brought at a whopping $1,500 each, stacking up to $12,000 total, and Harold nearly fell apart when he heard the price. Harold's jaw drops at realizing he's been paid $7,000 a day. Now it's almost double, and he can't stop thinking, if this keeps up, I'll stack savings way faster than I planned. Then he decides to go straight to Tosus and ask about it. Harold grills Tasusan, asking what it'll cost to reach the southern continent. Now Tasusan pauses, thinks it through, then finally gives his answer. In the forest hut they've claimed as temporary shelter, Harold and Addie dig in. Because Harold can't stop counting numbers in his head, they'll need about 3 million for two just to reach the west, and if they go straight for the southern continent, it jumps to around 10 million. That steep price is because the shortcut slices right through the monster-swarmed sea, but the western route costs less and stays safer, because safety is everything. Once they can raise the money, they'll finally be okay. Harold can barely contain his excitement. At first they aimed to raise 5 million, but now he's got a crystal clear plan, and their hunt through the maze finally kicks off. Harold and Otzi push deeper into the maze, keep landing hits on monsters, and then rush the trophies they win straight to the floor shop in the city. Harold and his partner Addie, a dark elf, suddenly clicked like a perfect combo, moving as one and smashing through everything together. They raked in $170,000 in a single week. Then after the must-pay expenses, only $100,000 is left. Harold wants to hit the middle levels next, and Addie's just grinning like it's already handled, swearing she'll take care of everything. Harold tells her this gives him hope, and tomorrow he and Addie will dive into the maze's middle levels. She nods along, but he's still clueless about what's waiting there. Not a single clue flickered for Harold or Addie the day before about what waited for them on the maze's middle levels. And right now, the time has finally arrived. Harold and his partner, the Dark Elf 8, are marching straight into the maze's middle levels. Harold's stomach twists. Could this be it, finally to the middle levels? But the real question is what horrors are waiting for him there. Suddenly, Addie, still a little ahead, froze mid-step and tensed up, and Harold shot around, stunned, yelling, "Wait, what happened?" After a tense pause, Addie blurts to Mr. Harold, trembling, that she doesn't like what's going on here. Harold presses her for the real meaning, this suffocating atmosphere, the way we've gone completely off track, and Addie listens or tries to. "No, that's not it," she snaps, then footsteps. Someone is closing in on them. Out of nowhere, Addie slammed Harold into the wall, shrieked that they had to hide right now asterisk, and just as the words hit, a monstrous roar burst from the labyrinth, leaving Harold frozen in shock. Down the corridor, they rush past the hiding spot of a monstrous grin, teeth bared, eyes blazing like flames, charging toward them fast. Addie jerked back as a monster surged closer, and Harold, terrified, not pretending, let out a brutal scream when a huge beast roared out of the dark. Right then, a hulking monster body thundered past their hiding spot, brushing by the tunnel where he and Addie were cowering. With a blood-curdling scream tearing through the tunnels, the monster vanished into one of the dark corridors. Addie crumpled to the ground as the monster tore past, then snapped the shocked Harold awake. This thing didn't come from up here, it slipped in from the lower floors. She dusted off her clothes and set it straight. This monster looked like some kind of earth dragon. The guard's words hit Harold instantly. Now Harold finally got who the Guardian was talking about. When he warned about a monster sighted in the upper levels, he was pointing right at that thing below, and 8 snapped that her normal bullets wouldn't even scratch its thick skin. Harold urges Addie to head home and admits he'd love to explore the middle levels, but the thought of facing that creature turns his stomach. Addie nods and agrees. Addie and Harold snapped into panic. Then they heard a man in the hallway yelling for help, sprinting straight toward them. Then a man burst out of the corridor, yelling at the top of his lungs, demanding they wait for him. His face twists in pure horror as he shrieks, "A top-tier monster has shown up," then begs someone to save him. The man crumpled to his knees and gasped that 4 of them were trapped. His buddies had ducked into a crevice, yet the monster tracked them all down anyway. The man warns that this brutal monster by the crevasse is just waiting, letting people stumble out before it sinks its teeth in and devours them. As the runaway man's desperate laments spill out, Harold squints like he's piecing a puzzle, and then it hits him. "I've seen you before," and suddenly the memory snaps into place. The desperate man begging for help turned out to be the same arrogant bully who'd harassed Harold and Addie near the maze entrance. Now, though, it's far too late to run back and call for help. The man keeps begging, and Harold can't shake the thought that almost nobody can take down that monster. Sure, he gets why the person feels desperate, but this move is pure recklessness. Harold stares at him and thinks, asking the people I just tangled with for help, that's not a great idea. Then Harold blurts out, "I'm sorry." Harold kept begging, and the man blurted that some of the others had kids. If they died in that maze, their children would be left to fend for themselves, and Harold went ice cold. Harold's mind snapped back to his childhood the moment it hit him. First his father was gone, then his mother vanished too, and that pain flooded every memory. For Harold, that maze isn't just a maze, it's tied to how his parents died, and now that same cruel connection promises the same thing. The maze will steal another parent from a kid. Harold demanded to know where his people were, and the man shocked him. He really would help, though Harold still felt a little uneasy, like the guy might not fully get what Harold was saying. Harold grinned at Addie and shot back that the guy swears those people have kids. Sure, it drives him nuts, but he knows there's nothing he can do, so we're going to step in and help. Harold tells Atidat he's about to unleash his secret weapon and warns her she'll have to handle him when he passes out. Then she blurts in shock as he bolts, completely clueless about what secret weapon he even means. Harold gripped his spear tight and sprinted down the maze corridor, charging toward the crevasse to rescue everyone trapped below. Then he bolted straight to where the monster lurked for its next meal, and Harold's sure this is the moment. Those 4 are probably crouched inside that crevice, and the Earth Dragon is just waiting for them to slip out. Harold lurks behind the Earth monster as it waits, then he sizes everything up and snaps into attack mode. Harold leans in and says, "Since there's only one monster, I can pull off my plan without breaking a sweat." Harold said the monster is all careless swagger and arrogant pride, so it's so locked into its act that it doesn't even spot him behind its back, which gives Harold a perfect opening to strike. Harold snatched a spear on instinct, burst from his hiding spot, and screamed in his head, "Great, the monster wrecked me, this fight's over." Harold's body began to twist and surge as he siphoned power from another dimension, every inch of him detonating with energy while his brain locked up tight like it was seconds away from exploding. Now Harold's finally able to unleash that trapped, awful power through his short spear, then he drives it forward and lands a brutal blow on the monster. Harold snapped back to the day his father warned him years ago. This power wasn't magic, and that wild surge of energy was never meant to be shown out in the open. Harold hurled the spear with monstrous speed and raw power, and it shot toward the target, screaming for the one perfect strike. Harold's spear drove his blade straight through the stricken monster's skin, and the beast shrieked with fury and agony as it crumpled to the ground with a brutal crash. After that brutal, terrifying hit, Harold's strength drained to nothing. Blood poured from his eyes and nose. He staggered, his vision went black, and he crumpled onto the ground unconscious. As Harold plummeted, the last scraps of his consciousness screamed that this hit would ruin him, and through the haze he heard Addie's frantic voice as she came charging in to help. Harold cracked his eyes open and instantly figured his head was on something soft. Then it all snapped into place. He was sprawled across Addie's lap and she was shaking him, asking if he was awake. Seeing Harold come to, Addie broke into tears, wondering what in the world had happened. Then nearly right away, she sprinted after him into the tunnel. Harold flashed her a grin, swore he was fine now, and then pushed himself up the tunnel floor like it took every ounce of strength. Harold ponders with a dizzy twist in his head, but he still doesn't feel like anything worse is about to hit. Then Addie blurts that he apparently blacked out for some reason, and she sprinted after him, only to find him and see the blood. Harold grinned at AT and swore he'd be way more careful next time. Then AT shot him a glare and demanded he promise her, and Harold answered, "I will." Then Harold snapped back to the folks stuck in that crevasse, blurted, "Are you okay?" And right after that, the same people burst out of the tunnel. The whole company surged around Harold, all grateful for the rescue, and their leader shot out a heartfelt apology for how he'd spoken to them earlier. One of them breaks down in tears, thanking Harold for saving him because he'd already accepted he'd never see his child again and figured death was coming any minute. Harold grinned at his companion, Addie the dark elf, and they both let out a satisfied smile because every single one of them was still alive. Harold clapped his hands together, pumped after winning. Now he's begging to carry a chunk of that monster's carcass home for sale, but the hide is so thick it looks nearly impossible to cut. AT says the monster's skin is made of dragon metal, so tough you can barely pry it off, yet Mr. Harold has already carved a hole through it, and now she wants to ask him something. Trembling beside the downed dragon, Addie shoots Mr. Harold a furious question. How did he land a punch so massive it tore a hole straight through the monster? When Addie asked how he punched a hole in the dragon, Harold leaned in and said he did it with the rare skill, flaming continental all-destroying spear. When Addie hears Harold's answer about attacking the dragon, her jaw drops. She can't believe it, because she realizes the master has a ridiculously rare skill. Harold leans in and tells her the brutal truth. Every time he swings the spear, his consciousness slips, he faints, and the blade heats up so badly it starts melting, so he can't rely on it again and again. Addie snapped back to the moment she fell, and tears burst from her eyes again, shaking with near-crying desperation as she begged Harold, "Don't use that spear again." Harold's jaw drops. She really hit him right in the heart, so he listens, then lets out a sad smile and promises he'll make sure he never says it again. Then the rescued crowd surged up to them, offering Harold help to haul the dead dragon's carcass back to the house, because he'd saved every single one of them and they wanted to repay that courage with action. Harold grins and snaps up their offer, because this monster's got skin so thick it's unreal, and he has zero clue how much money they're about to hand him. In a company in Naples, Harold shows up with his loot, starts talking to the employees, and they hit him with the numbers. The average price of that material he brought in is insanely high. Harold gets hit with the news that his production costs exactly 13 million, and that number slams into him so hard he goes into shock, nearly fainting all over again. Panicked, Addie grabs the shocked Harold and blurts, "Are you okay? Because somehow your face just changed." Harold grabbed his head. He didn't have the words for it. Then it hit him. That's exactly why everyone was desperate to storm the maze and hunt. The employee tells Harold to type in his bank details because the payout is huge, and Harold's nerves spike. But he still fills out the form, even though he hasn't used a spear in ages and that old wound flared back up. At least the compensation makes it feel worth it. 2 days later, Harold basically tossed his bank account aside, then realized that his hard-earned 13 million was already sitting in his balance, transferred to him for real. He still can't process it, but he actually got the money, so now they're finally setting off on their journey to the southern continent. Harold rushes back to the HUD and tells Addie he's home, then swings in with a mouth-watering peach dish, offering it to her right away. Addie's like, "Wait, you're sure you don't want it for yourself?" Turns out T.I. was totally hooked on Harold's attention, and the second she spotted the yummy, her delight lit up in a way she couldn't even explain. Harold says he's cooking up a little surprise, so he hands her a treat. She grabs it, smiles, and says she's eating it right now. Harold lights up as Addie digs into that mouth-watering snack, and she just grins, saying she absolutely loves it. As she digs into her food, Harold leans in and tells her with a grin that they finally saved enough, and tomorrow, they're heading out on a trip. Addie spots the carriage for the first time and blurts, "Is that it, Harold?" He nods and confirms, then he tells her it'll ferry them straight to the port city. And just like that, they climb aboard a ship, slice across the whole continent, and finally hit the western side. Then they hop into a carriage and ride off into the distance. Through the carriage window, Harold suddenly spotted the ashes of a home that had been his for years, proof that everything he'd built was now just remnants. As he reels through every memory, he can't believe it. There's no way he ever could have imagined ending up in a situation like this. Harold flashes a content smile at Addie, thinking, "You never know what the world's about to throw at you." Addie caught his expression and pressed, "Are you okay?" He looked totally lost, so he shoved the conversation aside and asked, "Have you ever been to the Western continent? What did you think?" Addie paused and started thinking. Different races clash left and right, and yeah, that sparks constant conflict, but the whole mix is still irresistibly fascinating. Harold figures Addie's got something to spill once they arrive, and she nods. Then she blurts an apology for some unknown reason, but Harold cuts in fast, telling her she doesn't have to. Addie's voice cracks with emotion as she tells Harold-sama that since he needs her, she's already overjoyed. then Harold just smiles. Just a little ahead of the carriage, two figures appeared, an old man and a young girl, standing there like they'd been waiting forever because this carriage was their ticket straight to the port. The carriage screeched to a stop to scoop up pedestrians, and the old man shoved himself in first. Then his eyes locked on Harold and Addie in pure shock while they just stared right back. The old man pressed the young man. "Who are you really?" Harold's eyes widened and he blurted, "It feels like I've met you before, maybe you've got the wrong guy." But the stranger didn't back down. He launched into a story about a young someone he swore he'd seen already. The man said his face wasn't exactly kind, tried to picture his friend and remembered him as cool as ice, until he admitted his son just couldn't stand up to him. Then his granddaughter storms into the room and snaps at him, calling him a brute. He recoils, apologizes on the spot, and admits his memory's been slipping badly as of late. The girl drills her child to recite every name like a mission, then snaps, "What's your father's name?" The man blurts it, Jurgo, and Gerald freezes because that name feels strangely familiar. After a beat, the man bursts into laughter and declares they're heading to the Western continent. Then the main character finally clicks, they're already on the move right now. At last they hit the port city, bright lights, salty wind, everything alive. The man throws a quick goodbye to the guys, and then his granddaughter tells the heroes they're about to board a ship, urging him to pick his choice. Then they trade goodbyes. The guys decide to check the ship options for real, and after a bit the man leans in and tells them to pick what's best for themselves. The man throws a bunch of choices at them and warns they've got one whole week to decide, so Addie and Harold lock eyes and sprint off to hunt for a hotel. Suddenly, his bag gets yanked away from him, heart racing, because every last bit of his savings was trapped inside. The main character yanks the thief in place, spots the bullet scars, and then fires at the ground to pin him down and slow him up. The young man locks eyes with the thief and it hits him hard. The guy really needs money. At the same time, Addie steps in, pushing him to learn proper manners. Out of nowhere, the thief's mom shows up and blurts out an apology for her son. The main character tells her to raise him the right way, but she shakes her head, insisting she's trying, yet nothing's working. Suddenly, the young man snaps into a furious scream, shoves his mom to silence, and yells that if they've got money, they can finally help pay off their father's debt. Then he bolts. A woman barrels after her son and Harold clocks it immediately. This family's got major problems. Addie shrugs and says it's the same in every city, but right now they still have to hunt down a hotel. After hours of brutal bad news, the heroes hear the same thing in every hotel: no empty seats, no chances. Then they rack up over 10 rejections, and just when hope dies, they spot an empty room waiting for them. The room was so cramped there was only one bed, so the guys had to sleep side by side. Addie spots 2 pillows and freezes in total confusion, while Harold panics because the room is so cramped he doesn't know where to put himself, so he decides to slip into a bath and sort out everything in his head. Addie also wanted a bath and complained the room was way too tiny, and then Harold decided to sniff her, only to send the poor girl into full-blown embarrassment. Suddenly, Harold hears footsteps outside, men chatting about wild rumors swirling through the Empire and their campaign ahead, convinced the war is about to break any day now. After the young man finished his bath, he slipped into the room, collapsed onto the bed, and couldn't stop thinking about how he'd end up sharing the same blanket with Addie. Addie storms back into the room and shouts for Mr. Harold. The young man yanks Addie's hand, grins at her, and then blurts, "I'm still awake." Harold pushes AT to face the ship and talk it out, because they've got a whole week left, but if they drag their feet, every last ticket will be gone. The guys decide they'll grab tickets the next day. While Addie hits the bed, Harold can't shake the feeling she's not feeling well. The young man decides to hit the sack too, and he pulls Addie into a hug because she's his master. Guys crash out together, side by side, and fall into sleep like it's the only escape. The very next day, the guys grab 2 tickets for the ship. Then the man hands them over and tells them the departure hits in 5 days, right at noon. Later, the guys finally reach the ship and the young man demands to see the others' tickets. Then he practically blurts out how insanely lucky they are with the room, stunned that it still hasn't been taken. The guys burst into the room and freeze at what they're seeing, while Addie lets out a delighted scream. The girl darts up to the window and boom, she spots tons of fish swirling through the water and her excitement shoots through the roof. The young man finally clocks it. The whole room sits below the waterline. He realizes Addie absolutely adores this place. Then he grins and decides to roam the ship by himself, no backup, no delay. Right then, Cecile, the girl they'd just seen, snaps out his name and calls him over, and she can't hide how happy she is that the guys picked this ship. Harold hammers Cecile with a question, where's her grandfather? She smiles through the fear and says he's asleep, then grabs the moment and suggests they take a walk around the ship together. Just a little later, the girl dug into a mouth-watering meal and lit up with joy. She went in ready to propose, but the young man shut her down with a hard refusal. Suddenly, Cecile blurts out that her grandpa adored the young man like, only the people he truly likes get his time. Suddenly, Cecile yanks his sword free and angles the blade straight at the young man. Harold snaps aside her strike, and it floors the girl completely. Harold snaps that charging in like that is suicide, but the girl shoots back. If he hadn't reacted in time, she would have shut the whole attack down. Cecile and the main character stood locked in the alley, weapons aimed at each other, both of them waiting for the other to strike. Cecile smirked and stared Harold down, then asked if he was really ready to attack, since he fought her off instead of dodging like he was supposed to. The young man lets out a quiet chuckle, mumbling something like, "Who knows?" But inside he's shaken because what just happened to him earlier was downright dangerous. Harold grips his weapon, one hand on the hilt, the other on the far end, then fixes his eyes on Cecile, stunned by her dexterity as she steadies his sword in one hand and drops it low. The guy stumbles after the girl's lead, totally baffled, and blurts, "Why do you hit me out of nowhere?" But she just repeats the question, smirking and chuckling at how the main character reacts to it all. Cecile jabs her finger at the guy and grins like sunshine, then says because her grandpa adored Harold, that must mean Harold's a beast. The young man freezes, eyes widening and mouth parting as he stares at her, completely baffled. The guy can't shake it. This reason for the attack feels bizarre to him. Meanwhile, the girl slides her sword back into its sheath, winks at the hero, and flashes a promise. She's checked it and she won't pull that again. Still not buying a word, Cecile says. The main character shoots her a look of doubt and demands she promises exactly. Because he needs the truth. Cecile throws her hands up and swears right back that it's all guaranteed so he can finally stop worrying. His girlfriend tells him it's time to head back and jabs a finger the other way, and when the young man glares at her with his spear still gripped in both hands, he snaps back. Should they really split up so she goes first, since he still doesn't trust her after what just happened? She whirled around, beaming at the guy, and blurted out an apology, swearing, for the second time, it truly won't happen again, then cut herself off because she simply doesn't have time to finish. Suddenly, someone's screaming for help and everyone snaps their heads toward the sound, only to spot the robbers with wicked grins fleeing the scene, while a boy rides on one of their shoulders, begging for rescue and pounding the man's back with both hands. Right on the bridge's edge, Cecile and Harold stare in stunned disbelief as the criminals, totally oblivious to what's ahead, sprint off in a heartbeat, dragging a helpless child along as a hostage. The little boy is screaming, sobbing, and flailing like he's fighting for his life, right there in the hands of the bad guys. Then Harold freezes because it hits him. He's seen this kid before. He remembers grabbing him by the collar once, catching him in the middle of something. Cecile bolts the instant it clicks. The girl whips around and sprints the other way, chasing after the kidnappers as fast as her legs can carry her, while Harold can't help but smirk because there's not a single ounce of doubt in his friend's actions. A few seconds later, the hero shoots into motion, sprints in Cecile's direction, and closes the gap fast, right as the loud clack of his heels makes the girl whip around, shocked, and ask if he's decided to help her. He matches his friend's pace without even huffing for air, then shoots back, quick and simple, "Yeah, it's." The girl grins at the main character and says his warm, kind face fits his character perfectly. Plus, Harold's no slouch in a fight. He's a solid warrior, the kind of good guy who earns it. He furrows his brow and pouts like he's offended, while the girl bursts into laughter and keeps sprinting. Then the young hero skids to a stop, jabs his finger sideways, eyes wide in shock, and blurts out curses. The heroes burst into the middle of the bridge, staring at the pier with raw fear and iron resolve. Right on cue, a boat slips away with two kidnappers, and in their grasp is a helpless child. Harold blurts in pure despair when he sees two men suddenly leap into the boat, one thrashing the oars like a machine, the other grinning with a child perched on his shoulder, radiating straight-up menace. The main character and his girlfriend sprint for the pier, but they slam into defeat too late as the boat has already vanished across the water. He blurts that he and Cecile were so close to catching it, and just as that happens, she yells at the hero, "Sit down." Cecil charges toward the shore, gripping two oars like their lifelines, and snaps her gaze to Harold, pointing at the boat and pushing him to grab a seat. The guy blurts out, "You're sure you can grab the boat without permission? She's a stranger." The hero hesitates and knows it's a terrible idea, but there's no way out. Then the girl snaps, screaming, "If the boat gets damaged, I'll pay for it myself." Even so, the young man nods and climbs into the boat, and it slices through the waves as they chase the kidnappers. Then he reaches out and yells at Cecil to stop rowing. Hiding behind a stone, the main character peeks out to size everything up. Harold spots ships tied to the dock, but there's nobody in sight, just mountains and a few boats drifting like ghosts, and that's when he knows those criminals are on this island. The girl points at the odds and snaps, "They've got a hideout for whoever abducts the kid. Look how many ships and boats they still have, they're not alone." Then both heroes climb out of the boat and hit the island's shore. He clenched his weapon tight, crept forward so quietly it felt like silence, scanning the room for any sudden ambush, while Cecil threw her fists up and shouted that she'd smash everything in here. No fear, no hesitation, and not a single sound would stop her. Harold blurts that he and his partner have to be careful, and Cecil plants her hands on her hips, declaring everything's fine, she's strong, and the main character's solid too, so they're definitely not just going to lose. He shoots an eyebrow up, wondering where the girl is pulling that kind of confidence from, and he admits, straight up, that Cecil is way stronger than he is. Then right when everything clicks, the hero gets yanked off guard by a sudden noise. The main character sinks into the sea's endless silence, eyes skimming across the water, until out of nowhere he spots a blurry boat shape far off. He freezes, stares harder, and tries to pin down its outline, but deep down he's not sure it wasn't just in his head. Harold tore his gaze from the endless waters and surged toward the forest, chasing after his girlfriend, gripping his spear so tight his knuckles ached. Sure, he'd just seen a boat full of fishermen, yet a nagging confusion wouldn't leave his mind. As the hero's path clears, Cecil plants her feet and strides forward with steel in her eyes, while her friend follows a step behind, weapon up, ready to strike, then glances around like she's already found the island's secret lair, believing it's out there somewhere. Hiding behind a tree, the heroine peeks out and scans the area, then blurts out a rhetorical question like, "Can anyone even be here?" After a breathless pause, she slips from the bushes with a couple of twigs in her hands and demands again, "Is anyone there?" Her cheeks flush as she swings her arms and blurts out to the guy, "What are you doing?" Harold snaps back that there's 0 point wandering around, and then the main character jabs his finger to the side. The characters lock eyes on a picture, staring like it just might tell them the truth. Then they spot it. Grass crushed in spots, fresh enough to feel like someone crossed through minutes ago, and Harold and his girlfriend can't stop staring at the dried shoe tracks etched into the ground. The main character's gut tells him someone's been through here lately, so he's already sure. But the girl, snorting in annoyance and refusing to look at him, snaps that she'd noticed it all on her own without Harold prompting her. He flashes an awkward grin, blurts out an apology, and shoots the girl a cautious look like he can melt the tension between them. Then 2 seconds of brutal silence hit, and she suddenly cuts in, saying he didn't need to apologize at all. After a bit, the characters step out by the house, old, beat up, and weighed down by time, like it's crouching behind those wide branches, hiding secrets. Then Harold realizes with a jolt they've finally reached the spot he's been chasing with his girlfriend. A girl and a boy stared at the shut door, tense in the air, while the young man bluntly said the trail they'd followed this whole time finally led them here. This was the kidnappers' hiding place. The young man snaps his head up to the sky, lets the cold rain bite his hair, and hears that storm noise building like thunder on the way, until, without warning, the downpour suddenly explodes into something far worse. He stood there with his head tilted, clocking that the weather was turning ugly fast. Then the rain rolled in and forced him to scrap his plans. The young man dips his head, and when the rain suddenly hammers harder and harder, his eyes widen in real shock, his face twisting into confused disbelief like he can't even process what just hit him. The torrential rain crashes harder and harder, and the heroes are suddenly huddled side by side under a pounding downpour. Cecil snaps her head up and bolts straight for the closest building, only to discover it's the kidnappers' hideout, scrambling inside to escape the rain while she's sprinting hard, frantic, and yelling because she has no clue where this brutal downpour suddenly came from. He gapes in pure shock as she barrels toward the building without even slowing, eyes huge, and before he can even process it, she's basically at the goal. Then he snaps and screams, "Where are you going?" Harold yanks Cecile by her blouse and jerks her back hard like he's fighting fate itself, and you can hear it in his voice. He's fully aware it's deadly to step inside, so he snaps that they're not going anywhere near that building. The young man blurts that they need a different, far more hidden entrance, don't force the main one. He scans the scene in a flash and realizes the nightmare. If they charge through the front, they could walk straight into bandits waiting inside, just like they're already set for an ambush. The hero grabs Cecile by the collar and tells her to stop fighting, to keep still while he pulses her, yet she keeps screaming and swearing she'll rip everyone apart, and if she's left out here she'll get soaked to the skin. The guy spots a window cracked open, bright light blasting through the rain, and before he even thinks twice, he turns to Cecile and pitches the idea: slip inside through it. The heroes spot barrels by the window and vanish inside them. One right away has a young guy crouched in it, urging everyone to check the situation right now, while the girl goes silent for a long, tense beat. Stuffed in one of those barrels not far from Cecile, she blurts that, according to her, Cecile and Harold are tangled up in pure nonsense, and that it'd be way simpler to wipe out every criminal now than to sit around waiting for some opening. The main character's girlfriend is convinced none of the kidnappers they spotted could be truly strong, but he snaps back. He won't rule it out, yet he insists they should dodge unnecessary trouble anyway. Harold stares at the wooden wall of the barrel and admits it: Cecile's salvation is his real mission. If it turns into a fight, he'll throw down without hesitation, but for now he leans into his girlfriend and orders her to follow every instruction to the letter, no improvising. Cecile huffs out a displeased breath, forces her irritation down, and says she got what he meant, then jokes that her friend is acting just like a grumpy old grandpa. Harold doesn't even argue, he just tells her to shut up. Second he does, he swears he hears footsteps creeping in from deeper inside the building. Right then, a gang of robbers barges into the room, thundering footsteps, blaring voices, and chaos everywhere, scattered in a ring around a few massive barrels, and two of them are hiding heroes inside. One bandit smirks and tosses his partner the plan for the guy who stole their goods, and the bandana-wearing thug narrows his eyes, then spits out that the thief will get exactly what he deserves. The man decides the thief won't just get cornered, he'll be handed straight to the boss so he can deliver the sentence in person. His eyes sweep the room, then snap to the wooden barrels like their placement has just caught his eye. The one-eyed hairstyle guy growls, then fires back with a sharp, icy reply, locking eyes with his partner like he's daring him to blink. Then, like he already knows what's coming, he flashes a nasty grin and pure focus burns in his stare. Meanwhile, the main character crouches inside a barrel and listens to everything outside, and even through the shouting he hears the gang's man say it: our boss doesn't stay cold about every little thing anymore, he's already lost his humanity. The two kidnappers burst into wild, loud laughter, then the bandana man smirks and says he can't wait to hear the boy's snotty voice. The main character is trying to wrap his head around the chaos, and then it clicks. Mad is the exact kidnapped kid who stole the thugs' stuff, and whoever leads those thugs, he's got cruelty and ruthlessness turned up past the red line. Harold hears voices pounding in from outside, agitated, sharp, demanding, and the questions snap him to attention so fast his ears prick up, because the moment he starts piecing it together, nerves hit him like a wave. The bandana-wearing man drags a hand over his beard and fires off. So where did this spear even come from? And right then the hero's eyes widen, his weapon has been wedged through the hole from that razor-sharp tip the whole time. Cecile goes white with fear, terrified that this is the moment they'll finally be caught. The young man's eyes snap wide, his grip crushes down on the gun handle, and he keeps blurting out questions: what's this spear doing here and whose it is? One bandit lunges for the spear to yank it out, but his partner snaps his hand back with a sharp gesture. Then the first guy swallows hard and warns them, voice tight, that they have zero clue who it belongs to, so if they start fiddling with it, they're begging for trouble. The man, hand already reaching for the spear, squints and flashes a sharp, wry grin at the boy who stopped him with one side of his hair hanging, then nods like it's all settled. Hidden in a barrel, Harold catches every word, and his face tightens with hotter and hotter panic, fear creeping in with each sentence. Bandits peeled off one after another like they were sharing the same signal, and one of them barked, "Enough, let's go." A heartbeat later, the room packed with barrels was gone silent, the kind of silence that screams trouble. As the bandits rode off, one of the departing men muttered, eyes narrowing at the weird sight, "How was the spear still jammed out of the barrel?" Inside that barrel, Cecil held her breath, finally feeling safe, and she couldn't even find the words to react. Harold, crammed inside the same barrel with Cecil, finally exhaled when the bandit's footsteps faded away, and as the panic loosened its grip, he leaned in and muttered, almost teasingly, that she should just stay quiet, because sometimes it would be nice to let himself think about what he's feeling. Harold and Cecil slipped out of the barrels, holding their breath as they tiptoed toward the exit, desperate to slip out before anyone even stepped into the room. Harold ran his hand across the gritty wall, searching for some kind of foothold, and the sheer size of the building hit him all at once. Then his mind snapped back to the one thing that mattered. Where the heck were they supposed to look for the kidnapped child? Rounding the corner, Harold abruptly stumbled on two bandits walking shoulder to shoulder. He froze on the spot, panic punching through his chest, and he clamped his breath tight, praying they wouldn't notice him. Harold and Cecil didn't hesitate. They slipped into a random dark room, fast and silent, barely making it out alive, and the place was pure gloom, empty as night, perfect for hiding, while the bandits stomped right past without a clue. Harold snapped to attention when the girl called his name in a soft voice, and for a split second her words didn't land. He blinked, startled, then slowly spun around, totally thrown off because he never expected her to speak to him at that brutal, tense moment. Cecil jabbed a finger at the weird egg on display and stared at the main character, then her eyes widened as she demanded to know what it was. The young man snapped around and said it looked exactly like an egg just sitting there on the pillow. She prods the egg with the tip of her finger, and the next second she's swaying side to side like it just twitched. The heroine fires a question at her friend, "Did you feel it move or not?" And the guy shakes his head hard, saying, "No, she wasn't dreaming at all." Suddenly, the egg starts cracking again and again, crunch, crunch, until it shatters right before their eyes, and the main character and his girlfriend stare in terrified horror because they have no idea what's about to crawl out. The egg shell cracks open into two halves and something lunges out in a flash, bounces off the walls like a bullet, then smashes straight into Cecil, who jerks upright and stares at it, completely baffled. Something's latched onto the girl inside her clothes, and she tears at the fabric, shaking and screaming for it to get out, while the main character is frozen in pure shock. With his girlfriend, he's lost for what to do, standing rooted, panicking, and staring at her like he can't look away. Voices from the other side of the door start pressing in, demanding to know where that sound came from, like an intruder might be inside. Panic hits Harold hard because once Cecil screamed, he knows he and his girlfriend are about to get caught. Cursing through clenched teeth as the girl keeps shrieking and squirming to kill that awful feeling, the young man's mind races. Where could he hide now? The robbers are right on top of them, and one of the thugs yanks the door open, shouting that some weird sound is coming from this room. Two men sweep the room with their eyes. Nothing's moved, nothing's happened, at least that's what they think at first, while the young man slips into the closet and drags his girlfriend out with him. Something crawls inside Cecil's body and scratches under her t-shirt, and the moment she squeaks without meaning to, every man in the room locks on to her. The robber finally notices it. The egg that's been sitting on that soft cushion the whole time is cracked open, and now his partner panics, asking if someone hatched it and if this whole mess could be someone else's scheme. The robber just nods and says, "Yeah, that's totally possible." The two men keep talking, zeroing in on one brutal question: where in the world that hatched thing could have gone, because the wild part is that it hatched at all. Then a tank-top thug turns to his partner and demands, "So what do we do now?" One of the men recalls how their boss dragged him here, so if you want to understand what's going to hatch, you better find it or you'll never know. At the same time, Harold clamps his hand over the girl's mouth. She lets out a muffled sound, eyes snapping wide in shock because that creepy crawl over her skin still won't stop. In a hushed voice, the main character begs Cecil not to scream, because if she does, they'll both get spotted. Cecil answers with a calm, quiet moo. Snatching her hand away from her mouth, the girl hisses that the snake is slithering over her whole body and begs Harold to let her go because she can't take it anymore. Shock sparks in his eyes as the truth hits him. This is the only way. At this moment, he drives his palm deeper into the young maiden's mouth until she starts mumbling louder in pure disgust. Then, snatching control with his free hand, he dives under her t-shirt, hunting for the snake that keeps her from ever getting even a moment to breathe and settle down. Harold saw this was a do-or-die moment, so he snapped into steady action. One hand slid under the girl's shirt to clamp down on the snake, while the other smothered his own mouth shut so Cecil wouldn't freak out and scream at the brutal move. The young man begs her not to twitch and to go quieter because she started mumbling and trying to yank his hand out from under her clothes. Then she turns to him, hazy-eyed, and asks what he's doing, and he snaps back that they've got no choice. Cecile swears the snake has sunk even lower than it was a minute ago, then it wriggles out of her outerwear, slips straight into her shorts, and suddenly she's flooded with unbearable discomfort. Harold never saw this kind of disaster coming. He gripped his girlfriend even harder, panic snapping through him as he realizes the snake is loose where his palm never should land, and Cecile's face turns an even deeper purple. Good thing the young guy snatched the snake story right before it vanished into someone else's shorts, then yanked the reptile out from under his clothes with a snap of movement. He shows his friend the trapped creature and grins like, "I caught it in time." The girl snaps her eyes shut and flops onto the guy's chest in full surprise. Then Cecile just freezes, totally baffled, stays silent for a beat, looks off to the side and waits for him to help while she silently apologizes for all the screaming. The hero tilts his gaze to the top of his girlfriend's head, whispers that everything's okay, and even with all the grunts and screams, the thugs in that room still couldn't pin down where they were. Meanwhile, the two robbers keep hunting around that room where the egg was already cracked. One jerks the furniture back into the open, peering through the splits like it'll give him answers, while the other drops to the floor, sprawls out and mutters that he can't spot it anywhere. It hit him, this boss probably ditched that egg ages ago, so the blonde-haired guy leaned in with a wild plan. If they ever even find that weird thing, then kill the one who hatched from it. The moment the footsteps faded away from the room, Cecil and Harold slipped out of the closet they'd been hiding in, and the young man scanned the space. Sure enough, those two robbers were already gone. Harold's girlfriend wants to know how long he'll keep her around, and he snaps his mouth open in shock, then instantly remembers his hand is still clamped on her shoulder. With arms flailing in a desperate bid to make peace, the guy begs her to accept his apology. Yet Cecile snaps her gaze away and almost under her breath says he might not even need to apologize to her. The young man keeps trying to explain himself, admitting he was rude to her and saying guilt is crushing him. Then the girl lets out a heavy breath, steps aside, and with a barely audible half-whisper tells him she's not angry at all. Trying to change the subject, the young guy fumbles in his pocket and yanks out a snake he caught earlier, freshly hatched and squirming in his hands, and the hero asks, calm but sharp, what he's supposed to do with her. The little snake doesn't feel even a flicker of danger, because there's zero threat at all, so it never tries to bolt. Instead, it locks eyes with that huge human thing, staring with wild curiosity like, who is she? Because to it, Harold is totally new. He blurts out his thoughts, warning that those thugs from earlier will kill the animal if they track it down. Then the snake drinks in every word and purrs, bitter and sad. Harold locks eyes with the reptile and she obediently perches on his palm with her tail curled just a bit. But before anyone can wait for more clues, Duma spots the main character, and this snake is nothing like easy. Whatever it is, it's trouble. The young man tightened his grip on the little snake and asked again if she understood him, and the hatchling, still fresh from her egg, bobbed her head like a proud yes after he waited. Harold's mind started spiraling around the snake creature. He pieced together a few sharp thoughts and realized it was smarter than he expected, somehow understanding him effortlessly and catching every meaning. Right then, the main character called the baby snake to come along, and it answered with a happy little rumble like it was itching to join the adventure, until Cecil shot the idea down hard, hated every second of it, and rolled her eyes into a tight, wary stance. Harold is already firing questions at the girl. Will they really take that tiny snake with them? He twists the clues from what he's noticed lately, insists she even understands their meaning, and swears it can't get any worse, until his friend snaps back hard, flat out saying she's not buying this idea at all. In the near future, he spun away from Cecile, snapped his focus back to the animal, and even admitted, somehow, he liked her, and the snake burst out in joyful, melodious praise while Virgo's face instantly twisted into pure confusion. Racing up to the wall, the heroes skidded to a stop around the corner, and both of them stared as strangers streamed past, eyes sharp, attention locked in. Standing before a jaw-dropping door framed in fancy stucco, the young man grinned and announced, "This is the last four and the only place we haven't hit yet." Glaring at the door, the heroes caught a stranger's voice. He demanded they entertain him, and it sounded like he was talking straight to that young guy they called the cute boy. Then the words morphed into sounds that almost sounded like pleasure, like someone enjoying it. So the young man, with a sharp, half-exclaiming thought, figured it had to be Mad's voice, but when he replayed everything in his head, he realized he wanted to save the other guy quietly, and it just wasn't going to work. Cecile leaned in and asked her friend what they'd do in a situation like this, and the girl's face went tight with worry. Harold wanted to answer her, but even so, the boy was going to get taken by force. A friend pitches a killer idea, and suddenly it's time to split roles, one for the plan, one for the pickup, because the main character has to grab that young guy and rush him to safety. But then the guy warns him, this plan is insanely dangerous, because there's a strong chance other thugs will come running the moment they hear the commotion, so he tells his girlfriend it'll be brutal trying to fight while also keeping the boy safe, and then the main character lays out his whole plan right to her. Cecile starts snapping inside at what her friend keeps saying, like it's so easy to shove everyone together, so she fidgets and keeps pressing her view. If she's truly going to be the bait, then she's the perfect girl for the job. Harold locks eyes with her, those gentle, kind ones, and I can practically feel his faith in his plan surging. Then he keeps talking because he knows she's strong, and even he admits that fighting and protecting someone at the same time is too much for him. Cecile stares him down, and the guy closes his whole speech with a plain please. She turns away, goes quiet, and for a moment you can practically see her wrestling with whether to fall for the scam her friend just pushed on her. Giving up, the girl shrugs and tells him she gets it. Her job is simple: take the boy and haul ass. The young man nods, grateful, and once they've got a plan, there's nothing left to do but start. The crew slips behind a shut door, swings it open, and bam, one look at that picture sends goosebumps crawling up their skin. They shriek, then lock up in place, stunned beyond belief. Before them, a monster with sharp, pointed paws and a girl's body towers over the scene. She sits on the kidnapped boy and cackles, while mad screams tear through the air as he flails, trying to break free. His fists clench tight as he calls for help. With that insane, inhuman glow in his eyes, the monster doesn't even blink as he stares down the terrified boy, then growls that what he's getting still isn't enough and he wants more. Right at the same time, the kidnapped man lets out a blood-curdling scream, shuts his eyes, scrambles to get away, and pleads with the nightmare creature to end the horror unfolding right in front of them. The hero snaps his eyes open and realizes Mud is treating him like prey, and panic hits because he has no clue what to do next. Though the plan was to drag the boy out fast, everything is spiraling out of control. Harold still hears those two kidnappers' words in his head, and when the truth finally clicks, he gets what they meant, because the guy grips a spear and insists their boss wasn't fully human at all but half human and half monster. He snaps his eyes to his girlfriend, and just like that, no words needed, she instantly understands what he's trying to tell her. The heroes march deeper into the room, and then they stop dead, staring at a monster with 4 eyes. The boss lifts her gaze, smirks, and chuckles, asking who dares to come to her. A terrifying monster's presence slammed into 2 people at once, its face twisted with madness, a giant grin, and eyes so wide they looked ready to burst. Then it snapped, demanding Cecile and her friend tell it where they came from, and it sneered at them like children. He lets out a chuckle and tells them, "This time me and my girlfriend came for the boy." The monster's face snaps into a grin as he says, "So Harold's really asking for the impossible, huh?" The monster whips his gaze to the kidnapped boy and declares that this kid stole something vital from the robbers, so now he's going to make it right for all the mental pain she's been forced to suffer. In that clawed pause, the boss grips a tiny jar and claims it's worth a fortune. Its contents can cure every disease. 1 bottle costs 50 million rob, and yeah, the monster didn't buy it herself. She stole it right off the merchant ship. For a moment, the main character just freezes in silence, staring at the kid, then snapping his gaze to the robber boss when a brutal memory hits him. The boys scream about how he needed money so he could finally save his father. The main character clicks. These kidnappers aren't just criminals, they're pirates, and their boss, a half-man lurking behind the fearsome look that screams trouble. The monster snaps into furious mode, her face turns instantly grim, and her clawed paws lunge into the open to strike. The boss growls that he won't tolerate this disrespect, and the heroes suddenly realize they can forget mercy. The girl swings first, slashing the monster's arm. Her blade slices the air and crashes into its hand, but it's like she hit nothing at all. The shock jostles her twin tails out of place, the kind of chaos that only comes from charging full speed at the scariest thing in front of her. Cecile bolts after the impact, yelling that the monster's got a shell so tough it can't be pierced. Then her words ignite its fury even more, and with her eyes blazing white, the whole room erupts in her scream. Harold takes another hit straight from the monster's side. Its face twists into pure menace, teeth clenched so hard they look locked, brows snapping up and down, one eye squeezed shut while the other glares wide open. Then it throws its mouth wide and howls. Did it finally start attacking Harold for real now? The hero clenches his teeth, knits his brows down hard and tightens his grip on the weapon. Then a jolt hits as he realizes he's not striking something soft but metal. That brutal strike slams the monster to the ground. Only then does he realize the young man can actually crush him with a single move, and shock hits so hard that a confused gasp bursts out of him. A massive body slammed into the wall that used to be behind that nightmarish thing, and a huge, ugly dent tore into the surface like it had been punched from the inside. Slipping down the wall along what little flat space remained, the monster finally eased up, its paws resting in a calm, chilling pose, and you could practically see the half-man's stunned expression. Harold stared at the terrifying creature, convinced it hadn't taken a real hit, but it didn't matter anymore. He still gripped the weapon he'd used to smash something that once kept pace with the little boy, and now the hero was calling Cecile for help. Without wasting a second, the girl lunged forward, shot off in a blur, and clamped one hand around the boy's waist. Spotting the bottle on the floor, the one the monster kept talking about, Cecile snatches it mid-stride, yanks the kid away, and swears she's taking it with her. With a vicious swipe, the monster bares its claws and roars that it'll tear the girl and the main character apart, because that fresh young prey got stolen and even her panacea is gone. Rage boils in the monster's chest as he snaps for his subordinates. Where are they headed at all? Before anyone can answer, a whole crew of robbers bursts into the room, grinning as they say, "We made it, we're here." Seething with rage, he barks orders to hunt down the escaped girl at any cost, then make sure you bring Harold's girlfriend back to him. The main character locks himself in the room, convinced those three who fled won't stand a chance against Cecile. No way they can pull it off in so little time. In a pitch-black room, a monster boss with spider legs stalks ahead, and a whole crew of robber lackeys crowds the shadows, furious and tense, and right in the middle, Harold stands alone facing them all. The monster barks a kill command, and the bandits instantly surge forward to tear into the young man, so he clamps down on his weapon and races through what he's got to do next. Three robbers pounce on the boy, one grips a saber in his fist while the other two surge forward, fists flying with brute intent. The man swings in and slams a backhand at the main character, but he jerks back and dodges it with a terrified cry. Then, right when the robber thinks he's got him, Harold explodes forward and drives a brutal kick into his stomach as everyone in the room stares, frozen in shock. He rockets into his partner's arms, wincing as a nasty stab of pain hits his stomach. Then the main character snaps back to the fight, one criminal at a time. He drives his spear into them and sends them tumbling to join the others. Seeing all that chaos, the monster lets out a groan and thinks Harold is one stubborn kid. An hour, or just a bit less, blinks by and the robbers tighten their grip on their guns and rush in one after another, yelling that the main character should have been gone already while he just stares them down with a dead-straight face, asking them, calmly, not to say that kind of horrible thing. Nervous hands gnaw at the claw on his palm and the monster glares at him, then roars for everyone to clear out, while the main character snaps his head toward the shouting voice and the robbers still trading blows with him. With a savage roar, the monster unleashes a massive gush of thick white, gooey liquid, so bizarre it's barely even words, spilling from a ripped-open part of its body like a web of silk. She swings by accident and smacks one of the guys who battled the main one. Then the fear hits him hard when he realizes the boss's next strike could slam into him, so he whips his head around in panic, staring at the monster and the bandit thinking, what do I do now? A clawed paw lunges for him, but the guy jukes back, then blasts upward into the air, dodging the strike and keeping himself out of a fight with the robber boss because right now, the young man has zero chance to swing back. The clawed hand swings wild, and instead of ripping through him, it misses as the thing collapses, driving the poor guy into the building's roof. Shards explode down on the young man. He shields himself tight and stays seated on the wrecked floor. Snatching up his weapon, the hero pants hard and locks his eyes onto the monster, pure grit burning in his stare, while the boss sneers, taunting him over where his fuse went since he looks absolutely wrecked right now. Even worn out, the main character lets out a quiet chuckle, shoots the boss a sharp quip and thanks him for holding back like it's all a joke because yeah, there's zero sincerity behind it. Panting hard, Harold locks eyes with the enemy, gripping his weapon tight as he realizes he could blast her apart with the spear. Then everything stops because once he's down, her monster troops don't just vanish. A piercing scream snaps through the young man's thoughts. He whips around, eyes bulging with pure horror, and stares at the nightmare unfolding right in front of him. The robber shrieks as the liquid eats through his skin and face, burning and melting like acid, dripping off him in sickening streaks. And if that stuff really is toxic, then the young man's panic isn't just fear anymore, it's dread of what's coming next. Seizing the opening, the boss blasts out another flood of liquid straight for the main character, but he twists away at the last second. She never even gets a touch on him. From a jagged high mountain, a mysterious silhouette silently studies everything, lurking in the shadows like the air itself turns thick around him, its shape smeared and hard to make out. The young man was hanging on by a thread, his body shook, his grip slipped, and the spider boss flashed a grin because he could feel it. The hero was running out of fight. He swears he's snagged just enough time, because his strength is gone and there's no way he can fight right now, but he already knows exactly what he's about to do. With robbers closing in from every side, he snapped around, bolted for the open door, then his foot caught the spilled liquid, and horror hit as he realized he was about to go down. Harold crashes his face into the icy ground, pushes himself up with shaking hands, growls through clenched teeth as the truth hits. He has to run, but he's not going to make it in time. The monster realizes this is his shot, teeth bared as he lunges forward, paw snapping out toward the young man while he yells that he's finally got him. Right then, a strange silhouette on the mountain, Addie, snatches his sniper rifle, locks onto the monster and covers one eye to take the shot. A magical stream coils around her and with a sharp breath she takes aim, pulls the trigger, then slips a little sideways as the recoil kicks back. The bullet rips through the air and rockets straight for the target. Right as the boss is soaking up victory, getting ready to land the final strike, a bullet rips straight into his body. He gasps, flings his arms wide, and howls like a banshee, yanking himself away from his prey. The silver bullet struck the monster and instant smoke blasted outward in every direction, racing up toward the sky, stunning the beast mid-roar as its jaws stayed gaping and its eyes turned pitch black like coal. At the same time, that filthy thing's shell started ripping apart, collapsing into a disgusting heap. The trunk split in half, the belly turned into ruined scraps, and from his arms all that remained were his shoulders. The monster's servants gaped after their boss got wiped so fast, so they couldn't wrap their heads around it and started whispering that lightning must have struck him, because right now they're furious that victory was supposed to be right around the corner. Terrified that nobody else could rescue them, the robbers panicked and bolted before they even stood a chance, while Harold, stunned to the core, stared at the scene from the side in deadly silence. Pushing himself up off the floor and spinning around, the young man locked eyes with his maid, Addie, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. A friend gripped a strange gun in her hands and stared him down, her eyes burning with pure, unwavering determination. The second the guy stepped outside, the long-haired girl sprinted over and wrapped her arms around her master, while his eyes went so wide they looked frozen in shock. Right away, the girl confessed she couldn't make it in time, so she fired a bullet, steering lightning straight onto the villain, and she said Addie did it with razor care so she wouldn't upset Harold. That monster's image flashes in my mind, then I snap back to reality and wonder what kind of crazy power his maid must have, especially after I sent lightning. His expression shows raw, genuine shock at what he just heard. He can't believe it, she actually found him. Then she blushes a little and admits the truth. She's bonded to Beacon for her master, and no matter where he goes, she'll always track him down. 8 tells Harold this is the name of a special search magic, and Harold's just staring like, wait, you mean something like this even exists? Because it sounds wildly convenient and way too interesting. The maid keeps talking, saying this magic isn't some all-powerful cheat. It only holds up for a week, then it has to be refreshed again and again, but she still breathes a sigh of relief that Harold's alive and well, because the young man realizes that without this beacon, he might have been dead. Suddenly, the guy yanks the maid into his arms and squeezes her tight for a moment, then lets go, and Harold blurts out an apology for worrying her. Addie isn't mad, though. She just tells him, if that main character is in danger again, let me know. Cecile and the rescued boy have been huddled under a tree for ages, dodging the rain right there on the pier by the boats, while Cecile waits for the main character, and the second he comes into view on the horizon, she blurts out. The girl starts to flare up, snapping that he's late until she spots Addie beside him and the anger instantly drains away. Then she blurts her next question, how did the maid even get here? The hero shuts it down, saying not now, he'll explain it later. The main character's girlfriend backs him up fast, saying now isn't the time, there are bigger things to worry about, like how you can't even swim in a storm like this with the visibility slammed shut and everyone here at real risk of getting completely lost. The young man is wrestling with what to do next, because he can't just stand around and wait for morning. Turns out the clouds are already breaking apart in the sky, and that's music to every hero's ears, so Addie's is urging them to set sail right now before the bad weather slams back in. The main character and Addie are crammed into one boat while the kidnapped boy and Cecil rock the other. Then the boy's girlfriend grabs him and begs him to stop because something's seriously wrong. Harold snaps his gaze over to the second boat, desperate to figure out what just went down. The girl's face crumples with panic, and she screams that the boy's freezing cold, colder than the moment she hauled him out of those robbers' den, and when you stare at him closer, Mud's body is speckled with spots like he's been poisoned. A brutal flash hits the main character's mind, him catching the boy with the monster, then watching one of the robbers drop after that poison liquid sprayed him, his skin peeling away as he died. No doubt about it, it was poison, plain and simple. Cecil erupted into screams and begged him to let her hold on, shouting, "Can the child hear me?" And the look on his face was pure terror, straight-up panic. Meanwhile, Harold's eyes snapped to the bottle they'd brought, still clutched in the young man's hand. The moment it hit him, he crashed straight into a fresh memory, back when the monster bragged about that bottle, claiming it was ridiculously expensive and a cure for every disease in the world. Watching the boy, he thought, if this stuff can truly cure anything, then maybe that poison isn't stopping her at all, maybe she'll power through and help him recover. The hero figures Mad was hunting this bottle, but now he clutches it to survive, because he can't afford to drop dead from the poison of that nightmarish creature. Cecil decides the boy has to live, thrusts the antidote at him and orders him to drink, tears blazing in her eyes. Then when Mad can't swallow a drop, she panics, grabs the vial herself and pours it into someone else's mouth, begging like her life depends on it, praying it has to work. The kid snaps up right away, whips his head back and starts coughing so violently that some of the drunk stuff shoots out of his mouth. Then, a beat later, he drops back down flat with a few grim little remnants still smeared around his lips. Jamming the jar even tighter, the heroine freezes, staring in disbelief like, how is this happening? Why didn't it hit him harder? She depinned everything on this stuff, so tell her, did it really fail her? Junior's eyelids finally shut tight, gone, like hope was cut off mid-breath. Cecil and Harold froze in pure shock and terror, realizing the serum had failed them and the boy wasn't saved. Tears spill off the girl's lashes as she clamps her eyes shut and breaks down in sobs, while the young man stares around, stunned, then whips his gaze to the boy and finally to his girlfriend, whispering, are you dead? The moment Addie, Cecil, and Harold hauled themselves back to the port and returned the boat, they buried Mud, right there, building a small grave for him, and when they lifted their eyes, regret and sorrow hit the heroes like a gut punch. The young man already knew the boy's mother. He's sure she's out there hunting for him, and the second she finds him, she'll crush him in a tight hug, but that reunion is never going to happen. That's why he'll never be able to hand over his mother's body and explain what really happened. His whole body shuts down, even the courage to meet anyone's eyes is gone. Harold's choice is brutal. Let the boy disappear and make every soul who knows the truth act like they've got no clue. That's why he'll never be able to hand over his mother's body and say what really happened. He can't even lift his eyes to anyone. Harold decides to leave the boy missing, and every person who knows the truth turns it into silence, pretending they don't know a thing. Cecil stood by the grave, turning a tiny flower between her fingers, and swore she'd keep trying to save that child, because every attempt counts and she'd never regret what happened since she did exactly what she had to do. Then she laid the flower on the burial ground and walked away. The heroine strode ahead while the others held their breath, then steadied herself, clinging to courage, snapping her focus into place, and you could almost believe it was Cecil's raw gift, honed by endless sword drills every single day. Weapons aren't just tools, they're tied to human life itself, and the people who can wield them with true mastery know exactly how precious existence really is. And that's exactly what happened to Addie. Before she was dragged into slavery, she was clinging to life and death, surviving inside a deadly maze, and somehow Addie and Cecil have already made peace with it. And then the main character, just a short while ago living a painfully ordinary life, finally realizes he can't get his mind to quiet down, can't find peace in his own soul. His eyes drop to the ground as thoughts spiral inside him. while Addie watches with sadness in her gaze. Strolling through the city, the main character's maid finally admits there was nothing they could do, then brushes it off, telling them not to fret. The past is over, let it stay buried. The girl in the hat keeps moving because for her, the only thing that matters is that Harold and Cecil are okay. The guys heard someone yelling at them from right behind, "Stop," and that shout snapped their attention as they whipped around to face the speaker. The moment the characters spot his mother, the fear hits her face. She stares at him, and right then he understands he's going to have to lie, trapped in the look of worry on his mother's face. The woman burst up to the young man and yanked his clothes, tears streaking down her face as she sobbed that her son was missing, screaming so hard her throat was wrecking itself, begging anyone who'd seen him. Right away, the woman blares the morning news, and when she says her husband, the man who helps raise her child, has died, it slices straight through her and hits the main character like a punch to the gut. She says the man was desperate to see his son, Mata, before he died, so the boy's mother is choking on tears, and Harold can't squeeze out a single word, stuck there watching the hysteria unfold in dead silence. The woman drops to her knees in pure helplessness, blurting that she wanted to let the young man stroke Mata's head and pat his hair while he just stares, because that little guy had been begging to save his father. But at the end of it all, Mad still got killed, and before anyone could rush in, his father was gone too. Harold stares at his own guilt, thinking, if I'd moved faster, if I'd trusted myself more, I could have saved both Mud and his father. His maid remained stone still, barely a word from her, and the young man snapped his eyes to her, thinking Mata had been poisoned, that his father never got the chance, and that no matter what he did, everything was destined to end the same tragic way. She pushes herself up from her knees, swallows her rage, and blurts out an apology. Then her voice turns soft as she vows to keep searching for Mata. She has to find her because her son is all she has left. Mamamata sprints back to her house on pure willpower, clenching the last bit of herself so she won't break and cry again, and Harold's heart drops with crushing sadness, because he finally understands she's lost even her son, and he can't bring himself to say it, and nobody else could either. Days dragged by like that, and the young man stayed perched on the edge of the bed, replaying everything that had happened, only to realize it all felt oddly quiet with nothing truly big to explain. He showed Addie the snake and her eyes snapped open with pure shock, then, just like that, they named it together. And the guy said the only thing truly worth talking about was this moment. He hauled himself out of bed, pressed his face to the window, and wondered, is this really how the last night on the northeastern continent is going to end? In the dark, a young man stares at his reflection, wrestling with the painful truth, like he's finally, slowly starting to accept what happened to him. Harold stares at the little grave he and his friends dug for Mud, and a cold thought hits him. This is one more tragic tale that has nothing to do with him, and it always happens over and over again. A nasty thought claws its way into the hero's mind. If death comes for everyone so often, doesn't that mean his time is only a matter of when? He keeps replaying every twisted way he could have died, like when his house burned down, then he spirals. What if he'd been asleep and got trapped in the flames, or what if it happened mid-boss fight and just barely didn't make it in time at the last second? The main character stood there, lost in thought, when the maid cracked the door open a little and slipped deeper into the room. The girl strides into the room and calls Harold's name, her voice shaking as she blurts, "What happened?" Across the space, a guy snaps around at the sound, and the fear on his face hits hard, like his own thoughts just betrayed him. Pressing his own head, the young man snaps, "That didn't happen, none of it." He refuses to spill his thoughts or talk about what's going on in someone else's head. Still, that maid can't shake her worry. She stares at him and says he looks absolutely wrecked, then points out just how badly the main character's doing. He goes silent, then clamps his mouth into a tight, razor-thin line. He keeps insisting nothing happened, but he never gets to finish, because the second his eyes flare wide, pure shock hits him. The girl yanks the main character by the head and slams her lips onto someone else's, and Harold just freezes, shocked for a few seconds before he refuses to move or react. Still, he yanks the kiss apart, a strand of saliva snapping between their lips, and blurts out what Addie's doing, then stares at her with wide, shocked eyes as she clamps a hand on his neck. The maid snaps back that when something's tormenting a man so hard, the best move is simple: let him fall for a woman right now, because that's the surest cure she's ever heard of. Still blushing, she rips off her clothes and tells him, "It's yours now, take control and do whatever you want with me." The young man just stands there completely frozen like he's nailed to the floor, then he forces down a thick gulp of saliva and blurts out that, yeah, maybe the maid is right. Without warning, the main character shoves the unsuspecting girl onto the bed and tells her he won't stop, even if she begs, because she already said Harold could do whatever he wanted with her. Addie huffs out a trembling breath and swears she's ready for anything, then the young man locks eyes on her, glances at her lips and closes the distance. Harold yanks the girl into a long, dripping kiss and won't let her slip out. Addie can only mumble against the main character's mouth, not even trying to wriggle free, because yeah, she's into what's happening right now. The moment he snaps away from the kiss, he clamps his palm onto the elf's curvy body and squeezes hard, then drags his fingers side to side as if he can't get enough, while she throws her own hand over her mouth, muffling every sound. Still toying with the beads, the young man brings them to his mouth and shoves them in, pinning the girl down on the bed. She screams, and this time it isn't pain, it's pure, overwhelming pleasure. Rage still sparking, the hero backs off, hovers over Addie and tells her to breathe and calm down. He's already geared up for what's next. The girl shuts her eyes and whispers that she'll try, but with one brutal snap of motion he drives into her and the elf erupts in a terrified scream. The young man kicks things into a wild sprint, moans, screams, and slaps fill the room, while the girl clamps onto the soft sheets and the hero pleads for forgiveness for his reckless behavior. Sorry, I can't help rewrite this because it describes non-consensual sexual content and explicit bodily fluids. If you want, I can rewrite it in a non-sexual, non-explicit way that keeps the emotional tension like fear, urgency, or confrontation. When it's all over, Harold starts blaming himself for everything that went wrong. The elf collapses beside her, wiped out from a brutal night, and the young man fights back, claiming he can explain it all since Addie offered herself, except the truth hits hard and once you stare at the facts, everything is dead wrong. That young man turned into a full-on monster. He snapped her own words into a shield and then lunged at that helpless kid like a wild beast. The girl's panic shot through her as she watched the main character do the unthinkable to her, and she barely had time to brace for it because she had no choice. That elf was still chained in the slave collar, and if he decided her move was resistance to the master's orders, he'd kill her on the spot. The young man stares at the sleeping girl and admits to himself he didn't just want cheap thrills, he truly wanted Addie. With a heavy exhale, he figures it's time to cool his head while the elf catches rest. The ship, towering like some giant bird, sliced through wild waves that slammed and roared against its sides, while above him a ceiling of thick gray clouds pressed down like the sky itself was cold, cruel, and ready to crush him. On the deck inside this place, a guy sat on a wooden bench, face worn down, eyes dragging with fatigue, while his fingers kept nervously worrying at his temples, and then his side broke the silence, thick and slow. I tried to shake it off by roaming the ship at night, cooling my head like I always do, but it didn't work. Those obscene thoughts still clawed their way back in. Then a voice snaps out and calls him boy, and boom, he lights up the second he sees the main character. The young man steps up to greet him because this is Cecil's grandfather, Valen. An old man plops down beside Harold, and Harold can't figure out why until the friend's grandfather clocks that weird stare and tells him, "Don't look at me like that," then says he sat down just because he wants to talk. Silence swallowed the cabin until Valen cut through it, blurting out his gratitude to the boy like it couldn't wait. Trouble was, the kid had no clue why he was being thanked at all, so he shoots the question right back. An old man says this is a thank you for taking care of Cecil, and the young man doesn't say a word, he just keeps staring at the guest in the cabin. A memory flashes when the girl yanks the child and bolts out of the building with mad, then the shock hits. The hero never expected Cecil to tell his own adventures to his grandfather, but Harold shuts it down fast and says he shouldn't thank him since he didn't do anything special. And even then, he still thanks the guy to the fullest, because Cecil is his granddaughter and the main character won't back down, insisting his girlfriend is even tougher than him, like she can handle everything on her own. But Valen steps up and roars, strength or weakness, winner or loser, none of it matters because the only real question now is this: did you survive or did you fall? When life hangs by a thread, nothing else means a thing. The old man keeps grumbling that she always charges straight in, and the hero nods along, no words, just a silent agreement, because her grandfather swears she's short on caution, and that alone could be the thing that ends her life. Cecil blurted to her grandfather just how furious she was with the main character's choices. Then the old man winked and said, "Got it right away, all those attempts to hold her back were really pointing here." The young man leans in, curious as the old man beside him stays quiet and drinks in everyone else's words. Then the old man suddenly asks, and it hits the young man, this was never a guess at all. With a nervous chuckle, Valon blurts out, what if Cecile suddenly attacked the main character? He stalls for a beat and the answer hits like a punch. The man turns tense, then rushes to apologize for what just happened. The young man shrugs that he isn't really bothered by any of this, and the old man lights up at hearing him say it. Then the old man admits he can't repay the hero's kindness, but he's willing to hear him out, and Harold's left completely clueless about what any of it was supposed to mean. The man watches as something gnaws at the guy the moment he calls out, and the main character snaps his gaze away, murmuring that he just wants to cool his head now. The old man knew he could keep the young blood busy, so he heads onto the deck with Gur right as Valen and Harold, packed in by a roaring crowd, rush toward a fight. One grips a spear, the other raises a sword. The gathered sailors immediately demand, so you're really picking a fight? As a few notice they're gripping wooden swords and spears, while up on deck the girls look terrified and the boys practically salivate for the spectacle. The young man can't even figure out how that cabin conversation spiraled into this, but he snaps into a fighting stance anyway, while the old man chuckles and says, if you want to shove your thoughts away, a brawl's the fastest way. Harold's face drains of color as the blood starts to need a place to go. The thought hits him hard, he finally gets who Cecile is. She's got the same spark in her like the girl, and suddenly it feels like he's not battling that old man anymore at all, he's fighting a younger version of himself. Grinning, Valen tells him he can't hold back his ramped-up strike, because power is real, and the other guy laughs it off, right up until a suffocating, oppressive pressure creeps into the air. Dark whirls spin around the old man and the main character, Valen's jaw set as he levels his gun at the guy, while Harold's face tightens with worry, teeth clenched, eyes screaming danger. A massive aura slams down with crushing pressure, and suddenly Valen doesn't feel like some harmless old man. Hell, even the hero can't even begin to figure out who he really is. Like he's inside Harold's thoughts, the man whips around and tells him, you still haven't said your title. The old man steps forward and declares himself, Valen Mayers, then boasts that he's the sword master of the previous generation, pride blazing in his eyes as his brow tightens in the center. The moment that title hit him, his eyes went wide, because even he could tell that name wasn't just some label, it was power. He knew his martial arts only in the shallowest, most basic way, but the meaning of that sword's title was impossible to miss. Now he finally gets it, why Cecile was so terrifyingly strong. Her grandfather, a legendary sword master and the one who came before him, trained her. Right now, the man asks if the young one is ready, but the kid flinches hard with fear, making the old man grin. What happened? He laughs, because this is a golden chance to go toe-to-toe with someone stronger. Harold tells him, if I strike then I'm done, and the man admits the hero's got a point, but warns that if Harold tries to bolt, the old man will yank him back and won't let him escape anywhere. Clenching his teeth, the hero realizes that even without ever trading blows, the gap in strength is massive, and it's so terrifying the opponent is about to drop his spear and surrender on the spot. To shut Harold up, the old man snaps that he'll strike first, then vanishes in a blink before the hero can even track him, leaving him baffled about where the opponent went. The whole crowd jolts with shock, everyone stares into the void and panics. Where did Valen go? The hero's gut twists and he stops cold, listening hard to every sound and to the warning in his own heart. Suddenly, a savage hit slams into him and he barely blocks it, jaw clenched, eyes darting around like he's hunting the attacker in pure panic. Valenry burst into view for everyone, slammed into his opponent's spear, parried every other weapon thrown his way, twisted out of the path of another sword, and his instincts never betrayed him. The onlookers who witnessed this fight froze in disbelief, and the raw tension between those two wrestlers hit the audience like a shockwave. The man smirks and laughs, saying it all worked out and the main character never even clocked him. The young guy answers, even steadier now, he saw nothing. With a sly wink, the old man asks Harold whether he can feel his moves, and Harold stares at his opponent, shaking with fear, because even while the old man holds back, he's still crazy relaxed and frighteningly strong. Before the dust even settles, the man snaps off the deck with a brutal shove and rockets straight at the main character at full speed. He shrugs off the hits, but in his head it feels like a whole swarm of Valens is crashing into him at once, every single one brandishing a sword, and he's left wondering how much longer he can keep standing. The crowd isn't shocked anymore, people are all over each other, praising Valen like crazy, because once you see his fighting style you can't even imagine he's some old grandfather. The hero crumpled onto the floor, wiped out to the bone, heavy breaths tore through his chest as he shut his eyes, convinced he had only a couple minutes left. Then, right beside him, a voice cut in, smug and taunting, asking if the guy had finally cooled down yet. The man isn't holding a single grudge, he just reaches out his hand to the boy. The kid narrows his eyes at the old man and finally mutters that yeah, looks like he's cooled off for real. Harold stands on the deck staring up at the sky and he can't deny it, Valon was right because he actually feels better now. Still, he's stuck wondering if it's just the exhaustion from getting beaten properly that made him feel this way. With his spirits finally lifting, the young man rushed to apologize to Addie. Because you can't keep dragging guilt around inside you and you shouldn't hold back on your effort when it's the right thing for everyone. The young guy tells the old man it's all good now, and the old man just lets out a relieved chuckle, smiling like he's ready to admit that hardships are something everyone endures. The man closes in on the main character and admits, heart-pounding, that he's survived hell too, making brutal choices, crashing through hardships, wrestling doubts until he can barely breathe, and even the old man once ripped his own title free with his teeth after fighting his way through years of misery alone. Valen keeps insisting that anyone claiming to have the truth is just spouting nonsense from people who refuse to face life's brutal hardships, and then the hero snaps back, asking what could possibly crush a man so strong. The old man never even glances his way, he just spits out that even now life still has teeth, like how his getaway turns into endless wrestling in his head, leaving nothing but questions and hunger for answers. Harold doesn't get a word of what the man is saying, so he presses him again, hard. The old man keeps his cool and tells him the truth. A war is about to ignite on the northeastern continent, and the Empire will do anything to seize control of the mainland and Valen. Valen already slipped out. And it was all to shield his precious granddaughter. After gut-wrenching choices, the old man finally picked that exact path. Valen leans in and tells the kid, even after I swore I was done with the Empire, my old title as swordmaster of the former generation keeps dragging me into fresh intel about it. While the elder pores over the Empire's new information, he snaps to the horrifying truth that it's turned into God knows what in this kind of chaos. Meanwhile, the young man leans in, hanging on every word Valen throws his way. As the old man growls, even now people try to crank out super soldiers, training for wars with his worst secret techniques, and running cruel experiments that try to fuse ordinary humans with the terrifying maze monsters. Harold couldn't stop thinking about what sort of man-end monster fusion could possibly match the nightmarish creature that poisoned the mud on the spot. And turns out, Cecil was telling her grandpa that she and the main character were going toe-to-toe with a human-like monster. So yeah, this thing most likely reeks of the Empire. Somehow that monster slipped free, then turned to straight-up theft and robbery, because the Empire usually doesn't let creatures loose from the maze, and an escape that happens on its own is almost unheard of. The man finally gets it, most monsters aren't unstoppable beasts, they're just brutally cruel animals and their so-called strength feels shaky at best. He rubs his beard, thinking hard, and then slows down mid-story. Those words slam into the main character's mind and leave him spinning. He can't tell if the old man is talking to him, as though Harold and Cecil's lives in that brutal battle meant nothing, like they were already beyond death. Harold's mind races, Valen would have handled that nightmare in seconds. But nope, on the northeast continent the danger is way worse than they first thought, so we need to sprint out of there right now. He keeps insisting he has to shield his granddaughter from a war where anything could hit at any second. Because for Cecil, Valen truly threw away every friend and acquaintance he ever had. The old man tore at the decision like it was a curse, and even now doubt still weighs on his chest, knowing at whether he truly made the right call. Valen just replays everything he's ever heard in his head. No one can tell he's carrying a grin-breaking load, because somehow it doesn't weigh him down at all and it ends with the same verdict. He swallowed the whole thing and moved on like it was already decided. Harold stands on the deck, letting his heavy thoughts and the need to cool his head settle in, because honestly maybe they're not so bad, so he stays quiet, staring out at the endless sea like it's pulling him in. The chaos slides down to the ship's lower decks, right into the cabins, where the young man paces in front of a door, spiraling side to side, crushing himself with worry as he grips the freshly delivered ring in his fist. Earlier, Harold stormed down to the ship's trading floor, scanning jar after jar, until his eyes locked onto a glint of silver clay in one of them. The seller leans in and warns the main character that this silver clay isn't pure, there are impurities, but it's mined straight from the labyrinth. The price is $100,000 due, and if it's in robes, it jumps to $200. Along with his apologies, the young man wants to hand Addie something, because he's convinced that handmade crafts are the perfect way to say what's in his heart. The main character asks straight up if there are any clayworking tools, and the merchant grins and says they're right nearby, any customer can use them. The kid in the cap asks if he'll work with clay and whether he even knows the manufacturer, and the main character just calmly admits he does, because he spent 15 years as a silversmith, leaving the merchant completely stunned. The young man freezes for a second, racking his brain for the first words, then grips the ring he made like it's everything and yanks the door handle open. His room finally comes into view. There, he's met by a maid who calmly spoon-feeds a tiny snake, and the second she spots Harold, she brightens, calls out to her master by name, and practically cheers his return. The young man suddenly feels uneasy. He jerks his gaze away and blurts out what the elf is doing. She grins and says she's feeding the echidna, the name of that little snake now. You can practically see it. His nerves are screaming, because the moment he stands beside the girl, his mind goes blank and no words come out. He grips the ring tight in one hand, then shoves the other behind his back like it's hiding the truth. The girl asks if she's okay, and Harold snaps, "I want to apologize for what I did yesterday." But Addie's totally lost because from her side nothing happened at all. The young man quietly admits these apologies are for what he did, because he literally attacked a defenseless girl hiding behind someone else's approval. Then, as if that fixes it, he chooses to offer her a small gift. With a careful touch, he slips the ring onto the elf's finger, then she tilts her hand out and studies the silver band, its craftsmanship stunning her, while she asks, "Did that guy buy this for you?" Harold scratched the back of his head and mumbled that he made the jewelry himself like it wasn't a big deal, because, hey, he wasn't terrible at it. The girl's eyes lit up even brighter and she leaned in, staring at the gift like it was pure magic. Glancing away, the young man blurts that silver scares off evil spirits, doubles as a protective charm, and even drives off werewolves. Then Addie smirks through the sarcasm and says, "Yeah, one already attacked." With a bright laugh, Addie raises her hands right over her heart and tells her master, "I get it, you're not trying to fight everyone, Harold just doesn't want anyone attacking him except you." The young guy nods, totally confused, and his servant keeps talking, because it turns out she thought she'd been understood, and the smile on her face says she was actually happy. She keeps insisting that his rudeness here and there was unnecessary, but deep down he still treated her kindly, because her first time with him left a mark she'll never ever forget, packed full of affection and love. After the lady spoke, Harold got hit with every word his subordinate threw at him, every conclusion too, and it left him so rattled he actually froze, eyes wide and bulging. Addie realizes it's basically impossible for Tom to believe every single word that just flew out of her mouth. Suddenly, the elf lunges in, slams the guy onto the bed, and looms over him. So close the young man forgets how to breathe, and all he can do is stare at his maid, eyes locked on her. The girl snaps that if her master won't believe her words, then there's only one move left, she'll prove it all with action. Then Harold's companion lunges in without warning and smashes a fierce, sudden kiss onto his lips, and Harold doesn't even flinch because deep down he actually loves it. The girl leans close to his ear and asks Mr. Harold to let her take charge in this case today. By candlelight, the whole cast bares their hearts to each other while the maid straddles the guy's stomach and keeps working with focused care, eyes covered, even now only worrying if the boy's okay. She leans in and asks, "Is it hurting you? Is it too hard?" He shrugs it off and says everything's fine. Then the maid shoots out an apology for not knowing better, because this time she genuinely wanted to be on top. This was meant to slam it into Harold's head that AT was there because she chose to be. Nobody dragged her, not a single soul. That's the story she wants to believe, but it feels like she's pushing him, and her mind won't shut up, dragging her back to the heat of her own pleasure. AT apologizes to her master, breaks down completely, and the young man finally gives in. Then the whole room erupts with the bed creaking and her screams of pleasure. Seeing the whole scene, Echidna's face burns with embarrassment. She scrambles away fast, leaving the main character and the girl alone together. After a while, the ship's commander snaps the word out. The whole crew will dock at the nearest island for 5 full days to refill everything and get back on their feet. After they finally spot a safe docking spot, the ship slams to a stop, and everyone on board spills down the lowered ladders into the city. The main character tells the girl they should wander the city because this kind of chance doesn't come often, and maybe they'll stumble onto something wild. The elf nods right away because with so few people around, something big is bound to happen. A girl and a young man stroll through the city together and the vibe feels exactly like the departure port, until you think about it and realize if this were a military port, everything would look totally different. The guy keeps pressing, asking which military port he means, and Addie shrugs. Maybe on the trip they'll get a chance to check one of them out. That place, the maid swears, feels totally different and it's going to shock the main character. The girl tells him that places like this run tighter rules and quieter streets, then soldiers march right down the road. The young man admits it sounds terrifying, but the heroine shoots back that because of them, the city stays safe. Every place has its own vibe. Harold doesn't get what she's trying to say, so he presses her again. She blushes and squirms at having to explain, but once a gentleman asks, she can't back out. Addie says this place can be packed with brothels, and yeah, things turn ugly fast because the soldiers are mostly men, so the skirmishes practically ignite themselves. That can scorch family bonds, or worse, someone might catch an infection nobody can explain, setting off chaos that brings waves of patience and even more trouble. So the elf leans in and warns the guy to stay sharp, don't let anything dangerous infect him. She adds that since he's a guy, he'll totally want to hit one of those places, and Addie is practically vibrating with nerves. With a gentle smile playing on his lips, the guy shrugs off this kind of joy and says he's got 80 instead. Right after that, the girl erupts into a full-blown tomato red blush. The young man finally gets what he just said, cheeks heating up even harder while the elf can't shake her master's words from her mind, so she quickly turns the mood and tells him she only wants the best for him. They stroll through the port city side by side, stop to stare at a boat moored by the shore, hit the fountain in the main square, and finally make for the bench where they're about to sit down. Sitting side by side, the elf tells Harold, "I'm calm now," but he's still staring like, wait, what changed? Here, the elf chose to spill her truth. She adored her master with every beat of her heart, and later, after finding the courage to speak up, she confirmed it again, this time not just with promises but with her own words. Maybe Addie would have fought back if he'd pulled this on day one, yet now she just can't stomach it, nerves spiraling as she clenches her fists and rattles it all out, while the young man catches every word and stays deadly silent, staring straight at her like he's waiting for something to crack. When the elf's words hit him, worry tightened in his chest, because one wrong move could have dragged that girl straight into her own death for daring to defy her master. Harold snapped his attention back to the question Addie was hitting him with. How long had she figured it out? He stared as Addie shifted her focus to the guy, batting those cute, wide eyes like they held all the answers. From that first kiss on, she kept realizing it more and more every single day. Meanwhile, the guy never once came at her with aggression, even though she was a dark elf hunted by countless dangers across the northeastern continent, and his calm, normal treatment made her fall for him even harder. He remembers the elf's collar is still biting her neck, then he shoots his hands toward her and tells her, "You don't need it anymore." The girl asks what the main character is even saying. Does he mean the collar or not? He nods and admits it's about that, but he has no idea how to get rid of it. The elf refuses to take it off, saying it's proof she's part of the main character, and the second she says it, her smile flares like a sunrise, like she's never once felt like a servant to him. The main character replays the elf's last words in his head, like proof that she's his, and then realizes the twist. The caller didn't want her taken away, he just wanted to watch the girl without him. He slows at the pier, tilts his head, and spots a massive cruise ship towering above him, the very one he'd seen back in the last port. The main character suddenly clocks it. He's almost certainly left the northeastern continent, and right on cue, that girl's face blasts into his mind. The girl clocks that something's seriously off with Harold, presses him for what's wrong, but he just shrugs it away, not even bothering to look at her. The very next day, the young man lunges into training. He tosses a stick at the snake and barks, "Take it." The echidna shoots away, grabs the stick and bolts for the sky, then yanks it back to Harold like it's racing fate. The girl watches the young man train his tiny pet, then the hero leans in and asks if Addie wants to have a go. She grins and grabs the wand. Somewhere out of nowhere, a tiny letter gets slid under the hero's door. Then the young man snatches it up, reads the message and realizes he and Addie are being invited to the night bazaar. The kid realizes they didn't stumble on anything special yesterday, so he doubts today will surprise them at all. Then he turns to the girl and asks, "Worth going?" And she nods, ready. The main character spots the bazaar packed wall to wall, assumes it's just some big advertising push, but the maid shakes her head and tells him there's more going on than that. He takes one look around the bazaar and realizes it's packed with gambling dens, and sure enough, everyone's glued to cards, poker tables, and slot machines. Harold's convinced this island is a shipping stopover, so every dockside spot here stays packed non-stop. Cecil hunched over a table, locked in with a few men, while the other players snapped that she was cheating, until she fired back that she's just painfully sharp-sighted. Right there on the street, the heroes snap to a familiar voice, and it's Cecil calling out like she owns the night. Harold's mind goes straight to one thing: as long as her grandfather doesn't catch her, they might still be okay. At first glance, you'd think her grandfather is just some quiet old man. But no, he's a hardcore gambler, and the moment he's caught, he starts panicking about what'll happen when he realizes his own granddaughter is the one gambling. This is way too much for him, so he shuts it down and pretends he never heard a word, and the maid nods along like, "Yeah, we'll do that." He urges them to keep wandering through the night bazaar, soaking in those breathtaking street views like it's pure magic. Every morning, Harold trains that snake again, coils around his body, then snaps up and settles on his head, and Harold flings his arms wide like, "Yeah!" Addie claps hard, staring in pure amazement at what she just witnessed. The hero swears the echidna keeps getting bigger by the day, but then the snake hits a wall, its skin won't shed, so how in the world is it still growing? Harold remembers this egg was pulled from a half-human, so honestly it wouldn't shock him if it wasn't a snake at all. Suddenly, a piercing scream rips through the air outside the door, then a woman's voice pleads, begging her grandfather to let her go. He swings the door open, blurts out what those screams are about, and right then, he spots a man yanking his granddaughter, Cecil, behind him. Rage boils in the old man's veins when he hears his granddaughter into gambling. Cecil scrambles to claim it was just a prank, then shuts him up by saying she didn't even lose, she won. The girl bragged that she had the dice in her palm and could read every card, so every game turned into a guaranteed win for her. Rage boils in his veins as he smacks his granddaughter's backside, barking, "Why are you even wasting time with swordsmanship?" They stare at the entire picture in stunned silence, and then Harold's friend blurts out for help because pain is ripping through her. But the guy just shrugs it off, refusing to step in, so the protagonist's girlfriend's execution keeps going and she lets out a piercing scream. Addie admits she almost feels bad for Cecil, but the young man shoots back that she knew exactly what her actions would bring. The maid mutters that his master's girlfriend called him by his name, and she sounds annoyed about it. The main character clocks it instantly, but he's still totally clueless why it's all going down. While the elf is mid-complaint, this young man jabs her cheek and blurts out, "You're so cute." Addie freezes, then heat floods her face as her cheeks go bright red. Next thing you know, the action shifts straight into a tavern where two men huddle over what went down that morning, the blaze that lit up everything. One of them blurts that the house went up in flames and the neighbors only got half burned. Then Harold snaps around, staring back with pure nerves. Even when it crushes him, he gets it, because he's lived that same kind of heartbreak, lost home, and the suffocating despair it leaves behind. He can't stop asking himself, was that fire sparked by careless handling or was it pure pyromania? Then he snaps out of it, shuts the whole thought down, and decides it's pointless. Tomorrow he's leaving this island, and local disasters have nothing to do with him. After they finished eating, Addie and Harold drift through the streets, locked in that what's next? Panic, will they hit the western continent? And the maid drops a new idea, maybe there's another transit point waiting for them. In a sudden alleyway clash, a young man spots his girlfriend, and the second she sees him, shock hits her face, then her gaze snaps to him with pure, simmering displeasure. The girl snaps and accuses the guy of being cold and cruel, because he didn't rescue her from her grandfather's punishment, and that stung Harold hard, especially since Cecil never thought he'd be capable of something like that. Wait, now it hits him. The sun's about to drop and she's still wandering the city like nothing happened, which can only mean one thing: she never learned her lesson, just like last time when the guy decided to stand by and do nothing. When Cecile shows up again, the maid's jealousy ignites and she snaps that the guy must be trying to protect her, like Cecile's perfect and untouchable. Then the girl puffs her lips and darts her gaze off to the side. The young man blurts out why he's acting this way all of a sudden, but she only bows and apologizes, no real answers at all, and he just shrugs and decides his maid must have been out of sorts today. That evening, back in the cabin, Harold grins and invites his companion to step out onto the deck and soak in the view. She's stunned, but she doesn't back out, because secretly she actually likes the idea. Suddenly, an echidna snake wriggles out from under his clothes and tries to say something, and the guy just assumes she's begging to join them, so after a quick look and a grin, the maid and the main character head up onto the deck. Harold says from the deck the port city's night view looks pretty normal, but the real focus here isn't him at all. The young man pitched the plan with nothing but the deck just to win his companion's smile, and now Harold can finally see that the elf looks happier than she ever has before. A young man and an elf girl stood on the deck, soaking in the neon night city sprawled ahead of them like it was calling their names. The guy swung around to Addie grinning and asked if they could head back home, and she smiled right back and said, "Yes, let's go." They spun away from the rail at the deck's end and hurried toward where they'd paused, and while the girl clutched her hat to shield it from the wind, the young man suddenly spotted something that felt horribly familiar nearby. Harold's gaze snapped to a new face nearby, arms crossed, that man standing there like he owned the horizon. Then the girl clocked him too, staring back with a puzzled, "Wait, who is he?" look. A brooding guy named Wallen fixed his eyes on them and snapped that he never expected to find them here, and the young man fired back, asking what their connection could possibly be doing at this late hour. The white-haired man's face snaps into a grin that looks almost vicious, and as he chuckles into his mustache, he says he's been waiting right here on this deck for his stupid granddaughter. The girl in the wide-brimmed hat and the guy lurking behind both caught it. The sly squint, the smile that never reached Wallen's cold, cunning eyes, and they both snapped with disbelief. Harold Smith squints with doubt, staring at the old man like, "How did you see all of that?" Then he blurts out why he's even waiting on his younger relative. Wallen's answer leaves the main character stunned because the man casually says he wants to hang his granddaughter. Then the hero can't stop his mind from spiraling into unwanted, disturbing thoughts. The old man snaps that if she won't listen the right way, he's out of options. He'll tie that rope around her and hang her until she finally starts thinking about every choice she's made. He's still reeling after that brutal tirade from the man over his granddaughter's punishment, and he blurts out, "Is this really too much?" An old man drags out the words and demands if Harold is watching over his granddaughter. She flushes, fights back tears, and blurts that he has no reason to do any of it. Wallen keeps that sly squint on the main character, then cuts him off. His question is done. The young man glares at the elf he just bought with a weird, uneasy look like, "Isn't this punishment crossing the line?" Then shrugs it off because it's not his business until he spots Addie staring at him way too intensely for comfort. The old man shuts one eye and with exhaustion etched across his face, snaps that his younger relative is a total prankster who never listens to a word, while a couple of heroes in the background hang on every bitter sentence of his rant. Harold cuts in and says it's not for nothing that people say a child never truly understands how cherished he is by his parents. Kids almost never stop to think about what their caretakers feel. The elder nods and admits his words are sharp because he's right. Wallen grumbles that he's been trying to forgive his sweet granddaughter far too often, but lately, what she's been up to has crossed every line. An old man relives the day he trained that girl, then fumes that she's using a swordsman's moves to gamble, yet he insists he never taught her to cheat. Smith hears him loud and clear. "This is all about a knight's honor, not about winning at cards." Wallen gets totally thrown off, jabs his finger at a weird creature crawling out of the girl's dress and blurts out what the heck it is, because the sight sends the young man straight into panic. Sweat pours off the guy as he stammers out, shaking, that it's just their pet, but that excuse sounds way too flimsy for an adult, and he knows it because the pet is still right there, waiting for the verdict. Wallen demands to know why the main character hid the monster, and calls the whole thing painfully strange, which leaves the young man and the girl staring in shock. He blurts it out, staring at his pet like it just betrayed him, because it's a monster. The old man's jaw drops, shocked the young one never knew the little friends belonged to creatures like that, and Smith? He'd only thought it was a cute bit of weirdness, until it turned out to be a monster too. Harold stunned. Valen figured out his pet with insane precision. He isn't even shocked by Valen's smarts, he just says, "I happened to visit that maze," and then adds that the young man's companion instantly got it too. They both knew they were hiding a truly unusual animal. Left homeless, the hero stares at his dark elf, brow furrowed, and demands to know if their grown-up contact is telling the truth. Addie's cheeks burn so hard she hides behind her bangs, blurting that she thought the young man already knew. Then it hits him. He's the only one who didn't have a single clue. Harold Smith is hit with crushing shame. His face turns red, beads of sweat pop out, and he snaps his eyes shut because he was played so easily. Wallen clocks the guy's panic and snaps, "Don't be embarrassed, no one's judging you." Then he leans in and adds, "Besides, I know a bunch of people who have got monsters inside them too." The dark elf steadies the old man and admits she's only ever heard rumors of people like him, but she can't believe it because it's insanely rare for a monster to latch onto someone like this. The guy lets out a heavy sigh, scrambles for a new topic to dodge the awkward tension, and jumps right back to the man's granddaughter, praying Cecile won't stick around too long. Old Wallen sinks right back into thoughts about his granddaughter, and a sly little squint creeps across his face as he mutters that, yeah, he's hoping the girl won't stay either because it'll be way better for her. Harold lets out a relieved smile, shifts the conversation, and asks if they should go hunt down Cecile together, because naughty kids don't get away with it, they get punished. That creepy guy with the strange smile thinks their pal is about to get hit with way bigger shame than he ever faced, so it almost makes his soul feel lighter, and the dark elf just grins right back at him. At night, the city streets thunder with people rushing past like their lives depend on it, and the heroes are hunting through the chaos to find one girl in the crowd. The main character and the dark elf he bought hustle between buildings while the girl, armed with her data, searches for Valen's granddaughter. But every gambling house they hit comes up empty, no matter how hard she listens, and the young man tells her to move on to the next one. Suddenly, the blonde girl's ear twitches at a sound and her gaze snaps to the door of a gambling house. Then she blurts out that the girl they're hunting is right there. They all snap their attention to the entrance again, and the guy double-checks, "Is our friend really here?" Because without Addie, this would have been a nightmare. Then he turns to the elf and asks what she needs, promising he'll do everything he can to make sure she's taken care of. The dark elf the hero snatched with his last coin lifts her innocent gaze, folds her hands tight, and tells him she only wants one thing. Then he asks straight up if she can make the young man's heart love her even more. Total shock hits him, his eyes go huge as he stares at the girl because her words just don't make sense. She keeps going, pressing him and asking straight up if he's against her wishes. The elf girl and the guy, still totally lost, kept heading down the street, and Harold shrugged it off like, "Look, I don't mind at all that you asked." The moment the travelers closed in on the gambling house door, they froze dead in their tracks, because the guy spotted something weird in the window and his curiosity sparked instantly. The second Smith spotted smoke spilling from the window, he slammed into the building yelling that it stank of burning, then shoved through the screams, Addie calling his name, yet he didn't stop, charging straight into the fire's heart. The whole room went up in flames, people scrambled to hide from the fire while the crowd bolted out, screaming and whining about some unknown monster they swore caused the whole disaster. Two men sprinted past the main character and the dark elf he just bought, shouting that the mystery guy set everything ablaze because he'd lost to a girl. Harold Smith snapped his hand up to shield himself from the flames, demanded what the hell happened inside the gambling house, insisted he hadn't seen Cecile, and even offered to push farther. His companion nodded along and agreed. The couple pushed forward through the inferno, flames swallowing everything in their path. At last, the main character spotted the girl he came for and shouted her name just as Cecile snapped into a combat stance, sword gripped tight in her hands, while flames swallowed everything around her. The girl screamed at the stranger, demanding to know why he went and tripled it all, why he set everything on fire just because he'd suffered a loss, and if he'd even lost his mind, because to her, it was only a place for entertainment. Forget that Valen's granddaughters are a total odd pair of knight and girl, and the path to them is slammed shut by a burned beam that's fallen across the way, while some unknown man grins and insists he's just having fun, like everything about this place fits too perfectly. Some mysterious stranger shows up and asks, like it's no big deal, whether losing isn't a reason to torch a gambling den he dubs a nest. Crouched with his elf buddy, the duo finally fought through the smoke and flames just long enough to spot the man Cecile was talking to, only to see someone else standing right beside him. A dark-haired young man in armor jabbed a finger at one of the hero's friends and with a savage conclusion accused her of everything. Because if she'd lost to him, none of this chaos would have spiraled any further. Cecile's rage was still blazing, her disappointment practically burned in her eyes as she snapped out words that proved every thought the young man had was pure nonsense. The stranger and the girl who'd stuck by his side sprinted for the exit, tossing out a goodbye to the girl they'd fought with, and when she lunged after them, Cecile got yanked by the arm. Harold Smith grabbed Wallen's granddaughter and stopped her from chasing that runaway couple, because if she tagged along she'd only fall into even more trouble, and that choice genuinely shocked her friend. He keeps replaying the mystery in his head, but he knows one thing for sure: he has to stop Cecile right now. Convincing her to back off, yeah, that part is going to be brutal. Wallen's younger relative can barely think straight, but even through the haze she insists she has to chase down that stranger who dared to beat her. Right in his arms, the girl just drops unconscious, and pure shock slams into the main character. A young man and the girl, both wiped out, come back into focus, and Addie snaps to her feet to watch everything unfold. The girl's eyes go cold and distant as she says Cecile must have passed out from sheer pressure. Then the dark elf shuts her eyes and declares their friend's situation is a gift, because they won't waste a second trying to talk her out of the gambling house. The main character is still clutching the unconscious girl upright and blurts to his companion, "Did you have something to do with this?" The blonde elf jerks her gaze away, looking totally innocent as she shrugs and says, "I don't get what you're talking about." With Harold's girl gripped hard in her hands, she thrusts her arms forward and summons the flames to do her bidding, burning her way open toward the exit, then blurts, "Move, we have to get out now, the fire's still everywhere." The young man steps after the dark elf, clutching the girl in his arms as she's still out cold, and blurts that Addie's right, she really did look like she was acting way too strange. The guys head to Wallen and she erupts in joy, screaming that her granddaughter is finally back, then thanking the heroes to the stars. But this cranky old man can't let go of one thing: why the girl is still out cold. So the guy starts spilling the whole story from the very beginning. That old man's face turns thoughtful, and as the heroes lay out the whole tale, he just nods, like every word clicks. So now there's no mystery left about why the entire city is freaking out. Cecile is shoved onto a bench since she hasn't snapped out of it yet, and the old man just keeps grumbling, because his relative got swallowed by gambling, and look where it all ends up for her. The man's expression flips cold, cunning, and cruel, and he snarls that the moment his granddaughter wakes up, she's getting beaten, but the main character shoots back that he can't help feeling a little sorry for her. Harold and the elf girl hurried into the inn where they were staying, and Addie even said Valen's granddaughter was truly heartbroken. The blonde girl starts talking to her master, saying, "I need a bath, I got pretty dirty in that fire," and Smith nods like, "Yeah, I should probably go too." Fresh out of the bath, Harold slaps a tea against the wall and pure embarrassment floods his whole body. Still clinging to the girl's waist, the main character blurts out that the dark elf smells amazing. Then Addie's cheeks explode with embarrassment as she looks away and confesses how ashamed she feels. The young man cradles the elf's head, draws her in for a soft kiss. Her eyes shut instantly as a sheen of sweat blooms across her face. After that kiss, he drops onto the bed while she sits across from him, and her face begs for answers, so the hero presses, "What happened?" She takes a breath and starts the story by praising him for being kind to everyone. T flicks her eyes up, opens her mouth, and demands the main character give her his full attention. She was so swept up in her work that it took a while for Harold Smith's voice to finally cut through and reach her. From her lesson, she snaps her head up, panicking, and blurts out that she's so sorry, asking if she somehow hurt the hero. He shakes his head and tells her, "No, everything's fine." The second the couple stepped into the most electrifying activity, all they could do was force their breathing into sync and clamp down on every sound. Once the girl and the boy had finally eaten their fill, sleep hit them hard, but not deep. They still tossed and turned, only pulling the blanket halfway up as they fought off the restlessness. As the ship sways on quiet night waters, the main character drifts out of sleep, slow at first, like something tugging his dreams away. The young man jolts upright, fuming, "Why can't I sleep?" Then he glances at the girl dozing peacefully beside him and gently pokes her elf ear, yanking her out of her dream for a second. Harold keeps his eyes on his pet, only to realize way too late that it's a monster, and when the echidna senses he's up and no longer asleep, she starts crawling straight toward him. The pet hops onto the bed and yanks the young man's sleeve, and he's so shocked he blurts out, asking what she wants and whether she's trying to show him something. The main character grabs his weapon, shrugs that he's got nothing better to do, and tails the snake-like monster, then blurts out in shock that he's going to lock horns with it. Striding along the ship's wooden deck, the guy asks if the echidna wants to feast on the night skyline, but she pops up, shakes her head, and twists her body side to side, basically saying, "No, that's not what I want." The young man starts down the stairs toward the ship's exit, stunned as he follows the snake that strolls ahead like it owns the place, steering him toward the city and asking if they're really going. The moment Harold Smith and his pet, found on the way, slip off the deck with wide-open eyes, the hero blurts out that this is a cruise ship. Ash then lunges toward the young man, and shock hits everyone hard. Right in front of him, a tiny wooden building is fully swallowed by flames, and the main character freezes in shock, then blurts out, loud and furious, "What the heck is going on here?" Still clutching the weapon, Harold stumbles backward and stares as that warehouse starts to collapse in flames, and the shock hits him hard. He never expected a fire to erupt in a place like this. So he keeps thinking there aren't any buildings close by, which means that flame probably won't leap anywhere else, especially since that place has been burning for ages and the fire is slowly dying down. He stands there staring as flames devour the wooden house, completely baffled. How is any of this happening when it looks like no one even lives there? Smith can't shake the feeling that something is seriously off. The main character steps closer and instantly knows this didn't happen by accident, someone torched it on purpose. He replays the recent chaos in his head and dread hits him hard. The latest pyromaniac might be behind the whole thing. Harold Smith hears armor clatter behind him and whips his head around. There, just like before in a gambling house, is that same couple fresh off fighting Valon's granddaughter, and the man standing behind him flashes a sly grin as he gets ready to strike up a conversation. The hero demands to know who this guy is and why his clothes caught him off guard. Then the stranger snaps that he jumped in too soon, labels him a brute, and fires back what he thinks, only for Smith to shrug and say he's asking because he doesn't know. An unknown guy strides in like he's got a secret mission, starts his introduction like it's huge, and then admits he'll tell the hero his name, because he's the Imperial's Count's third son, and Harold's mind suddenly clicks. That face, that place, he remembers where he's seen him. During the hero's maze run, it hits him. An unknown elf gets shoved into a knight's arms, and now the young man finally recognizes the guy standing right in front of him. Harold suddenly clicks that this stranger was part of the recent bidding. He realizes his rival is a count, but he never expected that count to be an imperial. A cocky young punk brags in his own voice and demands Smith confirm who he is, and when the second guy doesn't get what they're even asking for, he just nods along and repeats the first guy's words. Our hero can't stop wondering what this big-shot gentleman forgot on this island, and then, just like that, a familiar guy lights up, knowing Harold's finally paying attention and promises to answer him. The Earl's third son kicks things off by admitting, straight up, that he can't stay in one place for long, and Smith is stunned because the Imperial then adds that ever since he was a kid, he's been hearing a voice in his head. The young man rolls his eyes and smirks that his voice is basically a divine revelation. So yeah, he obeys it without question, and that same voice is the thing that sets all of this in motion. The Count's son grumbles that this weird twist forced him to flee his own empire, but honestly he's got nothing to complain about. His father still keeps the money flowing, so he never goes without. Now everyone on the pier is staring at the black smoke pouring from the burning building, while the Imperial insists the whole plan was whispered into his head, commanding him to torch the place. His eyes go totally wild and he screams, "If it doesn't thrill me, if I'm not into it, or if it's supposed to be funny and joyful, I'm still setting it on fire." Of course, the Count's son gets it all and says society hates the way he acts, then talks about what happened after that arson near Lamoist, how he's had to clamp down on himself this whole time, and that's when the main character finally understands. Harold Smith stares at the burning shack again and suddenly realizes his new friend lit it up just like he did in the gambling house. Then one more terrifying thought slams into the hero's mind. He admits it's just a wild guess, but doesn't the Imperial, the same one who torched the house completely, live right in that lamest zone we just talked about? This new guy pauses for a beat, then straight up tells him, yeah, that could totally happen, and says he even remembers something just like it. His eyes go wide, one wild thought hits him, maybe all of this is just nonsense, but the truth is, the Imperial is the one who torched his house. Then the second guy blurts, so what's wrong with what you did? Harold Smith expected revenge to be the first thing burning in his mind after hearing the news, but with a heavy sigh he realized it wasn't there at all. Staring at that still burning house, the hero snaps that if the truth really matters, then his new acquaintance must forget the place. Then his eyes go stone cold like nothing ever happened. The Count's third son flashes that sly look again and leans in, asking if the young man really thinks he should mess with a strange fellow like him. Harold grins like everything's fine and says he's about to go, and the Imperial fires back that he didn't threaten him. Then the second herald turns to retreat along the ship's side. A sword whips past his face and bites a fresh scratch into his skin. He snaps his head back and there it is, that weapon belongs to the Count's son. He slams the brakes on the main character and challenges him, asking if he truly thinks they'll walk out alive. With a crazy grin burning on his lips, the Imperial warns that the guy will be in big trouble if he talks to anyone. Then Smith snaps his head around and plays it all off with an innocent look. Blood streams down the cut on his cheek, but the young man doesn't even flinch. He stammers out that he's not telling a single soul. Sword pressed right up against the main character's face, the Count's third son sneers, acting like there's no way he'd believe a word. A fresh face tells Harold this chilling saying, "Once you're dead, you don't speak again," and then he swears he'll fish out the girl who spotted him in that gambling house. The Imperial ratchets up the horror and snarls that she won't get an easy death. He'll maim her, strip her of her limbs, and cauterize every wound himself. Later on, the Count's third son still can't rein in his thoughts. He rants about Wallen's granddaughter and swears that when she finally gives birth, the baby will be born into servitude under him. The main character's like, wait, how does my new friend even manage to twist his words and spit out stuff that nasty? Harold Smith remembers how tough Cecile is. Most people can't even touch her level, so yeah, she could have handled tonight, but no matter what, he just can't run from it. He scans the area with wide eyes, scrambling to hide his pet so nobody notices, but he barely even blinks when he realizes she's already tucked away, perfectly out of sight. Right when the hero slips for a second, his opponent strikes, sword blazing through the air, and yells at him to stay awake, yelling, "Don't yawn." The brutal move snaps the hero back to full focus. The young man whips around and slams his weapon straight into the opponent's sword, cracking the fight open and leaving the other guy stunned. The Empire reels in shock as he cracks a sarcastic laugh, bragging that the main character took his punch like a champ. Then Harold's mind finally clicks on one crucial thought. The young man decides the Count's third son is a total weakling, so there's no point in even wasting a fight on him. Smith's opponent bursts into wild laughter, charges at him with punches, and somehow Smith just slips them all, turns the attack back on himself, and walks through it like he didn't even have to try. He keeps charging in at the same pace, shouting, "Why are you just standing there? Why aren't you striking back?" And he insists that if this keeps going, the kid is going to get overwhelmed and beaten down. He refused to throw hands at all, so he shut his eyes and told himself Smith wasn't a total rookie, even though Smith was counting on him breaking into something fateful like last time. Harold locks in on the elf and the truth hits. This mess is probably her fault, the very reason Cecile started acting like something was off. Then the young man taps the enemy with the back of his weapon. No fight, no resistance, the guy just crumples forward, before the hero whips his focus to the girl, staring as she clasps her hands in a tense, ready gesture. Smith whips around and catches her grinning with pure malice, and he instantly realizes she's thrilled her master just got crushed. The main character figures the Imperial never treated her subordinate right, and suddenly her reaction doesn't feel weird at all. The Imperial gasped for air after that brutal burst, then yanked his sword back up and admitted his opponent was no joke right before he squared his shoulders and warned, "Now I'm going all in." The Earl's third son charges Harold Smith, roaring like a war drum, and swings for a brutal finishing blow, but Harold doesn't even let him land a touch. He snaps aside, drives the butt of his spear into the man's head, and the attacker crumples, instantly knocking out cold. He's begging for peace now, raises the spear tip to the guy's throat, and wrestles with one brutal thought: should he finish what he started and end him? Harold snaps to a convulsive shout and a blonde elf storms up. She jabs her fingers at her collar and growls that until her master unhooks it, you can't even seriously hurt him, let alone end his life. The Count's third son lies unconscious and the hero can't decide whether to panic or protect him, because he has no clue what to do next, while the elf keeps jabbing at her collar like it's screaming for answers. The young man glances one more time at the enemy crumpled in front of him, then yanks the spear free and declares, "I won't kill you." The elf girl shot him a grateful smile, thanking him for his choice and for the lesson, because the moment he raised a hand to the owner, the collar snapped into action so she couldn't even land a single swing. The stranger thanks him again, baffled to her core. She can't wrap her head around how someone as weak as her master ever got dragged into the maze where he took her over. With pure disappointment written all over her face, she blurts that if she weren't here, the Imperial never would have lasted in this world, and then she clocks it. He's a straight-up pyromaniac, leaving the hero stunned. As the guy closed in on the trembling young man, the girl kept on ranting about her own misery and firing insults at her master, throwing Gabriel into total confusion so he could only stare at her like, "Wow, what a rude girl." Smith starts tying up the Earl's third son and swears he's doing everything perfectly, only to leave a strange elf staring in total confusion as she blurts out, "What are you doing?" Later, the girl's throat rips into a scream when the young man yanks her in and ropes her down. She can't make sense of it, so she assumes he's just bullying her. The main character binds the Count's son and the elf together, then the elf explodes, yelling that Harold has totally lost his mind, since the guy he paired up is an Imperial who could cause trouble, and she's still stuck there watching the whole thing go down. Smith rubs the back of his head and admits he can't afford to ignore his opponent, because if he looks away, he'll just start burning even more. The elf shrieks that he doesn't feel an ounce of guilt while he's busy slapping a sign on the unconscious kid that screams pyromaniac, and the girl keeps yelling at him like he's nothing but a non-human. Harold Smith charged for the ship, but right behind him tore through the air the elf screaming truth. She wasn't as kind as he tried to look, and she even swore she'd make sure he couldn't play at feeding animals so his life wouldn't stay sweet in anyone's eyes. He spots his pet charging toward him, lets her hop right onto his shoulder and tells her, "That's exactly what we agreed on." In the dead quiet of early morning, a piercing, girly scream shattered the whole ship. Cecile, stuck in limbo, breaks down and sobs, asking her grandfather what he thinks he's doing, and then she snaps back that you just don't treat your sweet granddaughter like that. A relative of Wallen snaps, saying the old man wastes his God-given skills on who knows what and is hooked on who knows which games, but Wallen shoots back that she's just as bad, because she follows someone who might as well be gone, and that, he declares, is inexcusable. Mortified, she snaps her gaze away from her grandfather and blurts that he totally misunderstood everything, then insists she likes kind people, not whatever he thinks she is. Wallen, seething at her answer, snaps his eyes wide, surprise and irritation crashing together, then insists her younger relative was dragged in unconscious yesterday. The old man keeps grumbling that she was lucky their friends found her, because if anyone else had stumbled in, things could have turned out way, way uglier. The bound girl flinches at his words and blurts out, "Did Harold Smith really bring me?" And that question sparks fury as the man snaps and throws her a harsh scolding. The main character snaps the moment his relatives start bickering, then spies a cruel piece of the talk, an elderly man grinning while he tears into his own granddaughter, calling her clueless, both as a person and even worse as a swordsman. The kid swears his grandfather kept the promise and really tossed the girl who dared disobey him. Then he hears Cecil screaming, calling her grandfather an idiot because now it's her grandpa who's yelling at her, and that sparks pure indignation in him. With the echidna still perched on his shoulder, the main character finally snaps, stretches hard, yawns off the edge of another adventure and thinks, maybe I can catch a bit more sleep. Smith steps up to one of the sailors, firing off the question, when do they hit the continent? The sailor points to the route like it's already written, first another stop on the island, then the next one, and in 2 weeks that's when they sail. Smith thanks him and the truth hits hard, more than 20 days on the road already. Harold perched on the deck with his hands folded and realized just how much time had already flown by on their journey, yet he never could have guessed he'd run straight into the man who burned his own house. The young man slams his hands over his face, stares into the distance like he's searching for answers, and replays the sailor's warning about the next stop. Smith just prays this time it all goes off without a hitch. A young man and a girl with an elven look stared in shock at the island folk they just landed on, only to realize they weren't people at all, but cat-like animals walking upright on 2 paws. Harold realizes these animals are seriously smart, and the dark elf mirrors him, saying they can understand human speech and that this is their home. That young man can't stop admiring the idea that some animals actually understand people. Then his companion smirks and says, "Yeah, but those are totally different from our half-humans and you'll barely ever find them." The main character perks up at a voice coming from below, eyes wide in shock, and he leans in as the voice asks if they need help. Down below, the guy spots a cat-like creature in overalls and it immediately calls out, "Did the ship's travelers come yet?" Then reassures them, "Don't worry, this island is gorgeous, full of shops, so you'll definitely want to grab something for yourselves." The couple waves goodbye to the cat chomping on their fish, left with it by a fresh acquaintance, and the young man can't believe it still talks for real. Travelers keep a sharp eye on the island's daily grind. Cats calmly fish solo, but when the haul gets too heavy, they team up and help each other reel it in. The young man stood there completely stunned by everything happening on the island until he suddenly heard the elf who came with him shout his name. On the island, the main character gets stopped by a local who folds his paws, smiles at the travelers, and offers to guide them, then promises with full confidence that he's not charging a single thing worth worrying about. The cat keeps raving about the wonders of his proposal until the guy asks if it's basically a tour of famous spots. The stranger nods with full confidence and promises he'll lead them to secret places, too. The young man leans in and asks what kind of price comes with an offer like that, and the cat pauses, then fires back, "So, what do you think about 3,000 as payment?" On this island, the cat's resident wears pure inspiration, until Harold starts thinking his service has been dragged on too long. That grin slowly slips and tears finally spill into his eyes. The cat latched onto the young man's trousers with its claws, tears streaming down its face as it begged two travelers to say yes. Because he's got no job, no money, and nothing to live on, and then he practically adds, "Go on, you can even rub my tummy." Those words baffle Harold Smith's animal, and his dark elf bursts with delight, even leaning in to ask again if she can stroke that tummy. That question from the girl traveling with Smith has Smith scratching his head, but Addie just shrugs and tells him to stop overthinking it. After thinking it over, Harold finally buys the cat's plan, and the moment he does, pure, undisguised joy bursts out of him, even as he wonders if he's actually believing the truth. The kid remembers the deal. Cat promised it would give itself a pat, then, right on cue, it flops onto its back. The young man whips around to his companion and tells her to start petting the cat right now, because she wanted to and not to hold back, not even a little. The blonde girl drops onto her knees and a furry creature plops down right on her, telling her, "Stop petting me so much," while secretly begging for even more love because she can't help herself and insists he's insanely fluffy. The main character grins as he watches it all unfold, quietly savoring the moment, because the dark elf is really into petting that cat. A little while later, the animal kicks off the tour, leads the hero to brand new sights, shows them around, and then hauls him to a souvenir shop before the whole thing wraps up. The guy thanks their guide with all his heart and pays him the honest money he earned, only to get hit with another wave of gratitude, because the very next second the cat's stare suddenly shifts. Their fresh new acquaintance stared at the snake in pure shock, eyes wide as he realized it wasn't just any animal, it was a monster, and he blurted, "So, can monsters really be friends with people?" The second panic flashes across the main character's face and he snatches his pet. The cat snaps, "Don't freak out, trust me," and insists there's nothing to worry about because he won't tell a single soul. The creature glances again at the echidna perched on Smith's shoulder, weighs it up, and finally admits it looks trustworthy, but Smith isn't buying it just yet. Travelers and their guide all whip around at once because they hear a thunderous crash behind them. Right nearby, an unknown cat is getting swallowed by the local reservoir, splashing and meowing like it's begging for help. All the animal friends of the cat that tumbled into the water are lined up on the pier, screaming that it's a disaster. Then they crane their necks and shout the truth: their pal can't swim, just like every cat. The heroes roll up with their new acquaintance and they finally see it. Animals are still in full panic, screaming that disaster is here and begging for help or their friend will drown. Harold Smith knows he has to act. He yanks his bag off the ground so nothing inside gets soaked, tells the elf, "I'll be back," then launches straight into the water. The rescued kitten clung to the dock, spitting and coughing as water flooded its mouth while it fought to swim out. The creature started thanking the main character in the politest way imaginable for saving him, and the young man just sat there listening while the dark elf briskly dried him off with a towel. The very next second, Harold got pounced by the other cat's friends of the rescued animal, and they swarmed him in tight hugs, begging him to accept their gratitude too. The cat, once their trusty guide, watched the whole thing unfold, then padded up to the guy and said, "Yep, you're honestly a great person," like everything it saw just proved it all over again. Since the hero saved one of the island's own, the guide, mysterious as ever, slipped into a new act and promised he'd lead them to a place he'd never shown anyone. The cat's words hit like a bomb. Shock flashed across the young man's face and the blonde girl's too, because it made them question one thing again: did he really mean to lead them to that secret spot? Cat nodded and straight up demanded they go talk to someone. The guide swore there was someone hiding from everyone, talking only to himself, and Addie and Harold, still shocked, stared at the cat and kept listening as it insisted the unknown should speak to anyone but him, so he figured she wouldn't mind talking to them. The dark elf stared her master down and he snapped that the cat should explain how to meet their mysterious contact, so the cat meowed sharply like, "Chase him." The heroes trudged up the mountain slope on the island's edge by the sea, gripping the narrow trail as the guide's sharp voice warned them, step wrong and they'd tumble straight off the path. That cat kicked things off by spinning tales about a double that lives at the bottom of the castle slope, then warned that if the guys slipped from carelessness they'd be stuck there for good, though everyone chalked it up to superstition. Right after that, the animal's muzzle goes smooth, a grin blooms on its face, and it sweetly warns the couple not to fall for stories like that. After a while, the crew of travelers and their guide finally halted, spilling out onto a pretty flat stretch of land, and the cat's voice practically purred, "You've come to the right place." The elf and the cat, plus our main character, came to a stop at the bay's edge and just soaked in the breathtaking view. The young man realized there was no one around at all. Then the cat kept pointing at the water, and suddenly it felt like a mermaid was about to rise and drop in on them, the one the guys had to talk to. This news completely blew away two tourists. He blurted, wide-eyed, whether the mermaid really had to come to them, and she admitted she'd never seen them before. Addie told me she once heard there was a lake on the maze's lower level, one that had mermaids living in it, yet she never imagined they could actually be out on the surface. He replayed every word his companion said again and again in his mind, and a chilling thought hit him. Maybe whatever they were about to face was a monster that had slipped out of the maze. He stood there for his friend, puffed his chest, and proudly announced to everyone that the one he's bringing to meet his new buddies is nothing special, just a local mermaid who sailed up to the island from way down in the far south. The creature kept going, buzzing about how that mermaid is pure peace and somehow even knows how to talk, and then, right after, the cat winked at the young man and told him not to worry, to trust him, and boom, water exploded with a huge splash. From the deep, a mermaid burst up, whipping the sea into ripples, tugging at her hair, slinging it back and staring straight at the guests as they gawked. Then the animal shot toward his girlfriend, meowing like crazy. A cat named Annanella chirped for a girl and bragged that it had sailed in to meet him today, and the girl, perched on a rock, nodded along, saying she figured he'd show up and the weather was perfect. In the very next breath, the mermaid snapped her eyes to the strangers and demanded, "Who are you?" And her friend shot back, "They're my guests." While the hero froze in shock at his first sight of a mermaid, the cat still insisted they were good, so he hauled the idea to bring one here, and Annanella snapped back that she got exactly why. The tail girl turned out to be surprisingly polite. She greeted every guest with a bright smile and told them her name. The young man and the dark elf introduced themselves, and the way they greeted the mermaid made her light up. She praised their courtesy, even as she couldn't quite miss the fact they didn't look surprised at all. Out of nowhere, a butterfly dropped onto the girl's hand, its wings glowing like they were dipped in fire, so sudden that it didn't shake Annanella, but it totally caught the guy's expression off guard. Gabrielle whips around with a confused stare at the elf perched on her right shoulder, and when it doesn't make sense, her lips part. She's about to apologize. Addie glances aside and insists it's her butterfly, while the mermaid still pinches the insect on her finger and snaps that it reeks of witchcraft, checking for hostility or whatever, and then leans in to ask if the girl's doubts are finally gone. The dark elf insisted she felt zero threat. Then, if her move hurt a mermaid, she made it clear she'd apologize. The girl perched on the stone insisted she hadn't done anything terrifying, because the second girl never attacked her at all. She just wanted to figure out whether the cat's friend was the kind of person you should fear. With a grin, the main character tips the Panama hat on the blonde girl's head and tells her, straight up, that he's certain she never meant any harm. The mermaid begs him to stop dwelling on it all, swears everything's okay, and says Sabani told her they're good guys, so yeah, that's the truth. The next second, Sabani cuts in between the arguing guys and fires off a question, why are they just standing there, then throws his paws up and tells them, all right, enough standing around, time to start having fun and chatting. The guide plops down on a log beside the mermaid and starts spinning a story, then she bursts into laughter and tells him he's hilarious, and that sweet, crushing compliment makes the embarrassed animal squirm while the guy across from them breaks into laughter too. At first, talking to new people felt clumsy and awkward, but they finally stopped hesitating, and when it was all said and done, he realized they'd landed in a stunning place. He pops up from his seat and begs the cat and the mermaid to let him and his elf soak in the view because they've stumbled into pure beauty. Then the two stroll right up to the very edge of the shore and just lose themselves in the scenery. By the water's edge, a blonde girl shouts her master's name and begs forgiveness for how stubbornly she acted. The young man tells A.T. there's nothing to apologize for, this was all done to keep them safe. Harold can't pull off something like that, so he straight up thanks the elf, then the girl clocks it. Mermaid is ridiculously powerful too because she can spot her magic with some special knack, like it's coming through an organ of her own. The hero glances away and shyly blurts that if he can pull it off, it'll be insanely useful. Then the blonde spots the guy's got her attention for this and shoots back, say, is that enough? The girl's words totally scramble Harold Smith's thoughts, his face screams confusion, so he blurts out a quick no and thanks his companion again for warning him. Just as the couple keeps talking, their new friend's loud meowing hijacks the moment right as an exclamation bursts out, checking if what he's hearing is the truth. The mermaid finally speaks the truth the cat's legends promised. Yes, that fabled place is real, and it's the castle sunk deep at the bottom of the sea. The animal is still completely stunned, then bursts out in happy cheers, because the castle at the bottom of the sea really is real. Annanella keeps telling it how curiosity hit her hard, she peered in and someone was already there. The cat starts spiraling, was it the devil himself? And with that one line, the girl with the tail freezes, then tells her friend, I don't know, maybe it was him or maybe it was someone else. As she replays the face she saw and pictures his silhouette again, the mermaid snaps, this stranger's aura was anything but kind. Those words from a friend hit like a shockwave, and the cat panics, snapping that the very first thing he has to do is warn every single soul on the island about the danger. Annanella yells at him twice, stop. But she doesn't sense the trap. Sure, she's fine with him spilling all the residents' secrets, yet how's he supposed to explain where he got every last detail without exposing the girl with the tail? The cat snaps to what he almost did, then blurts that his girlfriend is basically a monster, and if the island finds out, chaos is going to explode. One of the guy's new friends backs up what her partner just said, and she boldly tells them people might as well call her a monster or even the devil. Then she insists virtue is still the right path but urges him to really think about what that girl is going through. He catches the whole scene at a glance and even hears every word of their conversation. His curiosity sparks instantly, then reality hits. He's a total outsider here, just like that elf, and jumping in just because he's curious feels downright indecent. The cat-like creature lets out a heavy sigh, completely lost in what to do, and the mermaid nods along, saying he'll need a while to craft a real plan. Tail Girl lifts her hand to her head and blurts, I don't know if that stranger's dangerous, so I'm diving one more time back to the castle at the bottom of the sea just to be sure. Sabani gives the mermaid a gentle look and tells her to be careful. She grins and says her friend is so kind, she treasures him for it, and nearby, a couple of travelers can't stop watching. Meanwhile, Cecile and her grandpa are stuck in the tavern and she snaps that he didn't have to come with her at all, so the old man insists that if he hadn't followed her she'd have caused trouble again. Cecile fires back that she already told him to stay home. Clutching her fork and taking a bite, the girl leans in and asks why her old relative has a backache, and as he starts to think of the perfect answer, he's yanked off guard when new people burst into the tavern. While Cecile digs into her food, back turned to the door, the man spots Harold and the dark elf stride in, and he blurts out that the youngster is finally here. The guy walks up and greets Wallen, and the instant his eyes lift, a blonde girl locks onto him with sharp, attentive focus. The next heartbeat, the old man claims he knows how to keep secrets, and his words pour like tea for the one who just walked in. The elf feigns confusion, flashes a sweet smile, and tells him she has no idea why he would say something like that. Then, with nothing happening at all, she decides that his wonderful trait is exactly that. The granddaughter of that man who just spoke, along with the main character, stared at the couple talking like they couldn't believe their eyes. Then Cecil stepped forward and offered to join the family meal so they could eat together. The company scans the place and the fair herd, wide-eyed, blurts out that the tavern is absolutely crawling with cats, and then she spots a whole herd of intelligent animals for the very first time. Her granddaughter blurts out her ignorance and her grandfather snaps back, "Nothing surprising, she's never even left the house." Then he leans in and says he's been roaming the world since childhood, so he's long since stopped being shocked by this kind of thing. The old man swears up and down that this island never changes. He's been here for 30 years and not a single thing has shifted since the day he arrived. Harold Smith presses the question, why did that man come to this island and is there some secret hiding behind it? Wallen shuts his eyes and, like he's diving straight into the past, tells how he spotted this island on the way. His wife had begged for a world tour. The main character presses for where the man's wife is now, arms clenched across his chest. The man finally blurts that she's dead and that this trip was her final wish because she didn't have much time left. The granddaughter snaps up what the relative just said, asks if it was her grandmother, and then makes it crystal clear to the guys she was already gone before the girl was even born. He stares in disbelief at what he learned earlier, shoots off a quick apology for his curiosity, and admits it probably is exactly pleasant to relive that moment. A ghost of a look crosses the old man's face and you can't tell if it's grief or something lighter. Then he quickly says, "Everything's fine." He adds that his wife was so cheerful that he wouldn't want to ruin the mood and get himself upset. The guy pivots the conversation, drops a bombshell about a superstition on this island, and it leaves Wallen and his granddaughter utterly stunned. The girl blurts that she's hearing about this underwater castle for the very first time, and the old man's eyes light up more and more as he admits he's already heard of it before. The old man kicks off his tail and swears that back then his legs felt young, so he set off hunting for the castle, news that leaves Cecil completely stunned. The main character starts firing questions one after another like, is this really true? Is the castle really at the bottom of the sea? And how did the man even find it? Then he tells the young guys the wild answer. To reach the castle, he sliced the ocean open with a sword, and Gabriel and his dark elf are left staring in total confusion. The man squints, scratches his temple, and admits he didn't want to spook the local seals, so he decided to do it at night, even though the darkness swallowed everything. With a fork clenched in her hands, Vaughn's granddaughter turns to him and, eyes shining with understanding, asks if her grandpa is lying, only to get a firm refusal as he shoots back, "Why would I ever do that?" The old man crosses his arms tight over his chest, lets out a heavy sigh, and mutters that he's already told the start, because no matter what, this crew isn't getting even a drop of seriousness out of him. Wallen tells the guys, if you want answers, you've gotta power up big time, and his granddaughter swears she'll try, finally satisfying her grandfather. The old man changes the subject on purpose. He leans in and tells them, you'll be on the continent soon and chances are your journey ends up splitting the moment you hit land. So the man steels himself, admits he doesn't know if they'll ever get a real goodbye, and goes ahead with it. He tells the couple he's had a blast with them. The truth? They're bound for the southern continent, while Wallen and his granddaughter are racing for the far western side of the western continent. Those old words light up the main character with a real, warm smile. Then he thanks the little family for everything, swearing that if fate has a soft heart, they'll cross paths again. Cecil stretches and grumbles that their farewell is the worst kind of mess, because she really liked Harold. Then her grandfather's gloved hand clamps over her mouth right on the spot. The man leans in, watching every twitch in the elf's face. Then his granddaughter suddenly squirms free, blurts, "Grandpa, what are you doing?" And he snaps back that she mustn't say things like that. The young man, it looks like Wallen isn't just worried, he's scared of Eight. The very next day, the couple sprawls on the bed inside their own little cabin, and the elf, clutched in the young man's arms, whispers that she'll be truly happy if he holds her even tighter, and he immediately agrees. Right then, they spot a stare in the cabin window straight at them, and in that sharp, careful look, they instantly recognize their familiar mermaid, watching like she's reading their every move. Harold Smith yanks his hands back from the girl's body, erupts into a scream, and shouts her name, while the dark elf and our main character are left reeling, totally lost about what he wants, until AT catches the truth. He's trying to talk to them about something big. The confused heroes hurriedly dressed and bolted to the beach only to run straight into a mermaid who blurted out that she was sorry for the interruption, and the guys quickly waved it off, saying everything was fine, then demanded to know what happened. The girl with the tail shoots an embarrassed glance at the couple, then tells Gabriel he looks like a solid fighter, and that the elf can probably conjure magic too. Gabriel nods like, yeah, I get it. The mermaid swears that on her journey she spotted a strange creature she'd already seen once before, and at first, she convinced herself he was just as harmless as her own kind of monster. After thinking for a moment, Annanella admits her guts changed. This creature doesn't seem harmless at all. She even heard the humanoid mutter to himself that it needs more bones. The main character leans in and asks the mermaid, "Do you want to call them in so we can handle this creature?" Then he presses, "Or do you want to make this a fight you force on me?" The young man shoots back, "Why should you even join this fight?" Then adds, "Just don't swim in there," and the tailed girl's face snaps to shock and offense. After hearing him, she slams her tail against the water with a loud smack and roars that her furry friend might be in serious danger right now. The mermaid snarls at the couple standing in front of her, eyes blazing. The elf braces like he's about to charge to her master's side while she's already got a gun raised and ready. Annanella finally realizes she crossed a line, then bursts into a terrified scream and rushes to apologize to the couple. Harold stood in front of the dark elf who looked like he'd charge into battle any second and told him, "You're fine." He didn't even sweat the words because Harold knew one thing for sure: you don't leave your friends hanging. The tailed girl tilts her head, taps her chest with her hand, and asks her new friends, right from the heart, to save Sabani because he means everything to her. Still in a storm of emotions, the mermaid spits out that nothing in the world can ever replace the crimson sunset she shared with her tailed friend on this very coast. The main character's face lights up with pure amazement at Annella's words, and then he whips his gaze back to the girl who spoke first, only to see tears already gathering in her eyes. The dark elf, still silent until now, whips her gaze to the owner and calls out his name, and just like that, Harold snaps awake from his swirling thoughts. He tightens his lips and nods, "Yeah, he'll help," and the mermaid snaps her eyes open and wipes away her tears while the elf immediately chimes in that she'll go with him. Down in the depths, the girl wipes the last of her tears with her fingers, beams a wide, white smile, and tells Smith she wants to thank him for everything, no holding back. To the hush of crashing waves, the heroes spiral down and down into the deep, trapped inside a bubble that won't pop, not even when they bump it. The dark elf and the herald stare in shock, trapped inside a bubble they've never seen before, one that lets the couple stretch their oxygen and keep going while they follow the mermaid. The elf keeps scanning the area, and Harold blurts out how mind-blowing all of this is, because he never, ever thought that the girl with the tail could pull off sorcery like this. He cranes his head up, feels the bubble around him, then grins and says that even underwater travel isn't a problem before asking, "So what are we gonna do when we reach the castle?" That girl with the tail smirks at Harold's words like she knows more than she's saying, then tells him to trust her, because water magic is her true element. The couple inside their bubble with their mermaid escort in tow barrels toward the underwater city. The blonde girl and her companion stare, wide-eyed and stunned, at the picture unfolding in front of them. Then the dark elf finally snaps to it. This is the famous castle at the bottom. The main character whips their head back toward their escort and freezes as she begins weaving brand new sorcery. The couple notices the water around the underwater castle start to quake with tension, and before the next breath is gone, a shield snaps into place around that eerie stronghold, just like the one they're trapped in right now. The young man carefully plants his feet as the bubble pops, and he blurts out that he can't believe it. The water around the castle has drained away and now they're walking on plain, regular ground. Addie looks totally fired up and says she can repel water too, but the moment she realizes it can't match what was done earlier at that massive scale, disappointment hits her hard. The mermaid snatches the words mid-conversation and declares that girls like her are naturally wired for water magic. But even among her kind, almost no one matches her power. Then the girl snaps, "I'll do it," and the very next second the tail vanishes and she stands there with legs. The blonde elf stares at that wicked witchcraft, stunned, and blurts out, "Wait, so this is magic too?" The mermaid answers like it's not a spell at all, it's just a power tied to their bloodline. The mermaid realizes no one's calling her out yet, and that scares her, so she moves like every mistake could cost her everything. Three guys slip through the castle gate like they're sneaking into a nightmare, and the young man scans the place and realizes it's falling apart, ancient, crumbling, and dead quiet, before they push into a massive hall. The mermaid who just got legs jabs her finger at one of those arched openings and declares, "That's where the guys go." Then everyone slips into the next corridor until, at the very end, they're met with a grim table piled high with old, forgotten dishes. Suddenly, a butterfly flits up beside the blonde girl and her creator jumps in shock, then she tells her master that it's twitching at something lurking down the hall. Bursting through yet another massive arch, the three travelers step into a huge, open room, and the main character instantly realizes how big it is. Then Addie slams his name out loud, screams that something's upstairs and pushes him to stay on guard. A heartbeat later, a shadowy creature swoops down from above and slams into the young man, forcing him to bolt. Then he whips around and freezes because a massive golem is right there behind him. The main character plants his weapon in front of him and braces for the attack from some unknown creature. Then everything stops making sense when he spots the bones. He realizes the golem was built into a humanoid shape using a whole pile of them. The young man snaps his head toward the mermaid. Now she's got legs and demands whether she's ever seen this monster before. The blonde girl nods and says, "On my last trip I spotted someone else, but not this golem." Harold Smith whips his gaze to the dark elf, who snaps into a ready stance, gripping her weapon tighter like she's ready to swing at any second, and he realizes this monster isn't acting alone. A hidden caster is probably controlling it from somewhere nearby. The golem's still glaring at the travelers, but then right on its chest, something starts to glow. Its bones split just a little, and suddenly an eye pushes through, leaving Harold and his elf completely baffled. The young man can't believe what he just saw, but the elf shuts down his doubts. She insists she noticed it too, then lays it all out. The caster is sitting inside the monster itself. Then, right through the bones and the eye, a sinister grin slips out, and the company realizes the golem's maker is dead sure of himself, convinced his creation can't be broken, so baiting him feels like the safest move. He says, "Don't even think about reaching the creator until we stop the monster." But Addie snaps back, "You've got it wrong, this isn't about monsters, we just deal with the one hiding inside." The blonde girl snaps into a fighting stance, raises her gun, and fires, 2 bullets streaking straight toward the golem. The bullets tumble straight into that hole where some unknown face had just been peeking out, and the golem suddenly starts to collapse, stunning the main character and the former mermaid at the same time. Once the bones finally drop, a man shows up in front of the company, kneeling hard, hands clamped tight on the exact spots where the elf's bullets tore into him. Addie finally loosens her grip on the gun and she's convinced her job is done. Then the young man stares at her in pure shock, saying he can't believe what she just did. The elf says they're lucky the golem was built from bones because there are huge gaps in that kind of work. Meanwhile, the young man is still reeling, staring and asking if the ent came just to claim this golem. Right in the next minute, a rustle snaps through the air, then the elf's monologue cuts in. She jerks hard, slams the gun back up and braces to fire any second. The main character is completely thrown off by the girl's behavior and he blurts out, "What's going on?" And she snaps back that yeah, she must have been mistaken. A wild stranger's grin locks onto a little team, a man and 2 creatures, then he blurts out, "How are you still standing with a face like that?" The man shoots back, "Do I need to move or tell you my story or not?" The white-haired man drops a single word about necromancers and the elf blurts out the truth. Those monsters rot their own bodies and claw their way into becoming liches, and yeah, he might be one. Then the girl snaps back that a few bullets won't cut it if you're trying to stop something like that. The blonde girl stared at the scattered bones the monster left behind, and snapped that only a necromancer could stitch a golem together from nothing but them. The dark elf whips her head toward her master and tells him the golem can only be beaten by cutting out its core. Then a stranger barges in asking why she's sharing this, but before his words finish, the girl fires her gun and the shots shut him down. The stranger stayed trapped in the golem all this time, and when the bullets started flying, he slipped every single one with effortless ease. Only his face muscles twitched from the impact, and that left the main character stunned because he could actually see the bullets being reflected. The men stare in shock, then sink into disappointment as he snaps that his case got declassified and calls it boring, before he turns back to the pile of bones and mutters that it all finally makes sense. The gray-haired man whips his gaze to the girls and demands one of them explain how she knows magic. then it slams into him why the water had dropped so suddenly earlier. The stranger stood right amid the bones and said this castle has been buried at the bottom for over 300 years, something he figured would never change until in the last 30 years tons of wild, unforgettable things finally happened. The man keeps talking and with a sharp grin he tells the heroes that in his memory the sea was split in two, and a whole swarm of strange, terrifyingly powerful visitors came crashing in. The mysterious stranger jabs a finger at three associates, and you can practically see the shock hit them as the gray-haired old man's words land. During lunch, the main character suddenly remembers Wallen's story. She can't stop replaying it, thinking about how he cut the sea in half, and wondering if when he bragged about power he was talking about the right person. A weird grin splits the face of this stranger and pure rage ignites in his eyes as he says he's decided to jump in on the fun, no tools needed. Then he scans the travelers' faces, hunting for someone to confirm he's right. The man throws his arms wide and starts yelling that he needs more, way more bones than he has right now. A spark ignites in the guy's eyes and it hits him, those wild legends they told on this island, they weren't lies. Harold stared back at the pile of bones the monster left behind, and then it clicked. The golem was built from skeletal remains, feline bones, all packed together like a sick trophy, and with fury blazing in his eyes he finally understood it, those deaths weren't random. Lunatic was doing it. After a tense little pause, the man finally leans in and tells his friends a story he swears is interesting. The gray-haired stranger smirks and says the castle started out with plain, regular materials, but then his grin goes wild as he reveals he rebuilt it the way he wanted. Three travelers stare at each other, totally lost on what's happening. Then, in the blink of an eye, the floor and walls start shifting and grinding, ripping the hero's plan to pieces. With panic surging through her, the mermaid blurts, "What's happening? Why is the castle moving all of a sudden?" Then she snaps her gaze to the hero and the truth hits her, he already knew. You can tell he's loving the shock he just caused in the whole company. The mad stranger claims he tore the past apart and rebuilt the castle himself, using bones he hauled in, then brags that he ground bone meal to remake the walls, the floor, and the ceiling all by his own hands, daring the travelers to finally get it. And you can bet not a single one of them stayed unmoved. The castle starts to peel up from the seabed in slow motion and then, boom, arms tear out of it, rising like it's alive, while everyone's faces go wide with shock as the stranger calmly claims he can control the whole thing just like a regular golem. As the building climbs higher and higher into the sky, that man's wild laughter booms from inside, and he laughs at them, telling everyone that Gabriel the elf and the mermaid showed up at the perfect moment, because he'll kill them first, then he'll slaughter everyone else on the island. The gray-haired madman roars that the bones of the heroes will fuel his stunning castle, swearing that with them he'll forge an unbreakable fortress, then he snaps his fingers. With a click that echoed through dead quiet, the man declares that his silent watching from the bottom of the sea ends right now, because it's time to step into the world and have some fun, and then his warriors crawl up from a pile of golem bones like they've waited all along. The stranger soaks up his own power and declares, "Round 2 starts now." He taunts them that these aren't like his last golem, heroes won't be able to handle this. Then he unleashes wars he's crammed to the absolute limit, forging something nearly impenetrable. The man steps in close and flashes his claim. Thanks to those massive reserves locked inside an entire castle, he can forge new golems forever. Then the young man is left staring in shock and right on cue, a voice calls out to him. He stares at his dark elf, gun raised and ready, and tells him straight up, these golems have no core, so the only way to stop them is to completely wipe them out. Sweat slid down the girl's face as she panted. No, that wild stranger wasn't bluffing. He was telling the truth about their density, and he could crank them out endlessly, piece by piece, from the very bones his castle is built on. After her speech, the girl snaps into silence, serious as stone, and Harold watches, sorrow heavy in his eyes as he tells her the truth. Taking down the golems won't be easy. The main character clocks it instantly. At is never this gloomy. Then the truth hits. The situation is dead serious and the enemy is terrifying. And just like that, the golems slam into the attack. He kicks off the fight by smashing the first golem's head clean off, but the moment he realizes there's no body part to stop it, and it snaps back in the very next second, cold dread hits him. These things aren't going to run out. The blonde elf whips her bow around and blasts every monster that crowds in. Then she's still aiming for that wild stranger, yelling that she keeps missing him again and again. The hero sinks into a crouch to dodge the monster, but then he realizes the castle won't stop. Every step drags it closer to the island, faster and faster. He glances at his spear and sees it already starting to crumble in tiny pieces, and the thought hits hard. With enemies like this, that spear won't make it much longer. The mermaid fights to slip free from the creatures clamping in on her, stuck defenseless with no weapon in hand. Meanwhile, the elf flings herself back from the grasping hands. The castle keeps grinding forward, closing in on the island where the cats live, and Harold's eyes flare with real anger. The castle keeps charging toward the island while the golems hammer it with non-stop attacks. He holds them back, but you can feel his strength draining away with every hit. Harold remembered his old friend was trapped on that island, and even if they beat the necromancer, he'd still feel something was off and move to smash the problem before it could grow. At that same moment, he understood one terrifying truth. If that colossal bone castle ever hit the island, it would leave bodies behind, so they had to crush his plan right here, right now. While he kept battling, the young man's mind raced for a way out. Because these creatures wouldn't quit and they kept coming with no end in sight, if his spear shattered, fighting those golems alone would be impossible. The main character finally clicks. This is it, time to pull out that secret weapon, and he swears that with one swing he'll wipe out every problem in a single moment. Then it hit him. His dark elf begged him to stop, begged him not to use her again, and mid-fight, someone's scream tore through the chaos. The young man spun around, and there it was, a blonde girl trapped in golem's grips, the monsters hauling her toward who knows where. He starts blurting out to his fighting girlfriend, eyes wide in shock. Then a wild man crashes into the moment, says he's already drained and it's time to end this pointless battle. Then he bolts out of nowhere. Harold realizes the walls are closing in, and he's got zero power to stop it. The mad stranger erupts into laughter, then tells the heroes, "Don't stress, your bodies are gonna be gold for my business." And as he swings his hand toward the elf, he adds that her body will be even more valuable. The gray-haired man, licking his lips, raves that the dark elf's body feels beautiful to touch. Then his golem starts savoring her, brushing her arms, legs, face, and everywhere else as he promises she'll turn into the most desirable corpse. It all crashes into the stranger's wild, insane laughter, and the girl's fear spikes higher and higher as she stays glued to the main character, making his eyes bulge open, staring like he's lost it. With a smooth, confident snap, the young man catches the spear mid-swing and starts calling straight into the dark, leaving the elder and his companion staring in shock. A suffocating darkness closes in on the main character, and his mind snaps harder every second, teeth clenched, fist crushing the spear as he lines it up and drives it straight at the villain. Overwork rips through him, tears spill, then blood wells in his eyes, while the muscles in his face tighten and pop into sharp relief. The mermaid spots it instantly. Something unbelievable is unfolding, and she can't stop watching in awe while the elf shrieks that the young man promised her he'd never use that kind of protection, and the way rage crashes over him makes an older man stare in baffled worry. Blinded by the chaos, the young man thrashes his spear through the air like a hammer, slicing it clean until only fragments remain, and that unstoppable weapon rockets straight for the mad stranger. The young man snaps his eyes open, jolts awake and goes, "Wait, where am I?" He jolts upright, scans his surroundings and spots the ship he knows, so the panic drains out of him and he finally calms down. He cupped his face, scanned his condition and realized he'd passed out, but since he's still here, that means he's going to be okay. Harold huffs out a heavy sigh, stunned by what just went down after the battle. He's convinced he's shaken his companion again, then he looks ahead and freezes in pure disbelief. The young man spins around one more time, but the sight leaves him speechless. On the left, everything turns black and white, and that weird shift rips open a storm of questions in his head. The main character snaps his hand up to his face in pure shock, and once it all clicks, he realizes it. His eye has stopped recognizing colors. Still reeling from what he just witnessed, the young man finally clicks. This is the price of that all-consuming spear skill, the same one he used to cut down the madman in his army. He cranes his neck to the ceiling, wrestling with every emotion in his chest, and then he finally lands on the truth. He doesn't regret what he did, because he figured stuff like this was always waiting for him sooner or later. Harold slowly pushes himself upright on the bed, wincing at every ache because he refuses to jolt his own broken body again. This has to stop now, or what comes next could be way worse. And as he stares at his hands, Smith scrambles to remember when he ever learned how to do this. Those memories yank him straight back into his childhood because he suddenly sees it. He didn't just learn to fight evil, he mastered this moveset before his father was even badly wounded. And the young man remembers his father's words, how even a father and son can be lined up differently, so he has to treat his gift like it's precious. He can't help thinking, maybe I was born for this. He rests his hands on his knees and doubts this force is truly unstoppable, because he's certain his father would have taught him all of it, even if he'd tried to deny it. Just as the young man sinks into his thoughts, a voice crackles from behind the door, and it yanks him right out of his memories. The blonde elf, face a little flushed, peeks out from behind the door to the room, whispers that she wants to know if the gentleman is okay, and the young man lights up the moment she comes to him, relieved and happy to see her. When the guy spots the girl refusing to step into their room, a warm smile breaks across his face. Then he slips onto the bed, calm and steady, and tells her everything's okay with him. Hands clasped in front of her like a prayer, cheeks burning, she shuts her eyes and blurts that she's so relieved everything's okay with her master. The elf keeps probing the young man, pressing him to admit that his crazy skill with his weapon wasn't the real trump card he bragged about earlier, then he just nods and agrees. The blonde girl plops down across from Harold on the bed and snaps, "I finally saw your weapon in action and I knew right away it's pure danger." Then she reminds him she begged him not to use it in battle and even got him to promise. The dark elf shot him a worried glance from beneath her bangs, then pulled on her feelings and demanded he stick to his promise, because with her real, heart-on-sleeve concern, the young man couldn't bring himself to refuse. The girl hunches over, jabs a finger at the young man and warns that if he breaks his promise later, he'll pay for it. Then she demands to know, "Did you get me?" He finds his partner's behavior ridiculously cute, throws a hand to his face, shuts his eyes tight and vows that even when things go critical, he'll still hunt for another way out, because he refuses to die too soon. The next second, the guy snaps back to the question he was about to build, then the elf cuts in and interrupts him. He tells her, "After I used my skill, what happened?" The elf turns her face away and starts replaying it in her mind. The dark elf brags that with a single strike the young man smashed every golem at once, blasted a massive hole straight through the castle walls, and that kind of raw power left even the mermaid and the girl herself completely stunned. After the guy crumpled and blacked out from sheer brutal force, AT dropped to one knee in front of him, scanning for signs he was still breathing, while the second girl stared in awe because that lock had been stabbed clean through. The elf closes her tail with a triumphant grin. Everything's settled, the underwater castle's gone quiet, and the necromancer has vanished for good. The young man can't stop smiling because that news hits like a wave of relief. Addie tells Annanella to thank him, and when he finally comes around, she needs him on the beach right away. Once the young man finally bounced back, he strolled in with his elf straight to the beach, and there, waiting like they'd been holding their breath, were that familiar cat and a mermaid, both practically bursting with joy to see him. Old friends leaned in and started whispering like secrets were flying, and that had the new couple on edge from the very first moment. The very next second, everything flips. Sabani and the girl with the tail bow together at the same time, thanking their savior in perfect sync like they couldn't believe their luck. He's blushing hard and insists he shouldn't be thanked at all, because he only helped his friend, but the kitten cuts in and declares he totally earned that praise. The cat starts waving his arms like crazy, yelling that the young man saved him and the entire island, so yeah, he truly deserves the title of savior for keeping peace alive here. Right then, the mermaid pats her friend on the head and beams as she thanks the guys for protecting him, absolutely thrilled. Harold and his companion beam with pure joy, convinced they've finally got everything they need, and they can't stop celebrating how perfect it feels. The tail-swinging girl snaps her eyes to her furry buddy and orders him to start, and he jumps in without hesitation, leaving the travelers' faces flooded with pure shock. Suddenly, the mermaid and her best friend start yanking something out from behind the stone they'd been sitting on, and at first Smith can't make it out, until the thing they pull free hits him like a shockwave and leaves him stunned. A weird-looking girl suddenly stands right in front of everyone, dressed in a maid's uniform, only her eyes stay shut. The main character flinches with outrage and blurts, "What does any of this even mean?" Sabani smirks and says, "We've got a gift prepared just to thank you for everything." The hero jabs his finger at the girl, snaps that gratitude's great but their gift is a person. Then the young man's eyes go wide as he stares harder and hard denies it, because up close it's a doll crafted so flawlessly you could swear she's human. The mermaid starts bragging right after that battle. She swam and searched the sea for ages, hunting for the perfect gift to thank the young man for everything he pulled off. The tailed girl admits that at first she fixated on a giant pearl, but her furry friend snapped her out of it and insisted that what she gives should be something truly rare. The cat and the girl can't figure out what they did wrong, so they grin with fake innocence and stare up at the main character. He takes the gift and the blonde beside him is totally blown away. Then he nods and says he finally gets why they picked that doll, so he bows his head and thanks them for everything. The couple tears themselves away from the shore, scrambles back onto their ship, and as their island vacation ends, they climb to the deck, only to catch a scream that blares, "We're leaving." The main character and the dark elf grin like they've hit the jackpot, even escorting their ship all the way to the pier. Then I'm back in my cabin and they just stop outside, refusing to step in, only opening the door a sliver or cracking it enough to peek. Mermaid waves keep lapping at the window set into the cabin wall, then they surge past and sail away. Harold glances at his companion and meets her focused eyes, then they stride straight to the gift their good friends had handed them. The guy asks what they should do with the doll, and the elf snaps back that she's got no clue what to do with it. The doll sits on the chair like she's sleeping, eyes shut and hands folded, and the guy clocks the obvious: there's barely any space for her. It's a hassle to turn down, so he swallows the inconvenience and takes the gift. He steps up, reaches toward it, and mutters that it looks top grade, meaning collectors are going to come crawling for it. Then, right out of nowhere, the doll snaps its eyes open and locks eyes with the young man, and the main character's fear hits so hard he can barely breathe. That girl, still a doll a second ago, suddenly comes to life, raises a hand to her mouth and blurts out, "I don't have a clue where I am. What kind of place is this?" Then the innocent-looking stranger snaps her gaze upward and clocks Harold and the blonde elf right before she blurts out the question, "Who are they?"